You're a
over
real
any other
estate
race.
broker, dude.
And
You
the
have so much economic
Terminology
power.
comes
It's
from
not
your
even
own
funny.
linguistics.
I'm
Go-
both.
Even by
Terminology,
your own
your own
definition,
linguistics.
you can be
What's
racist because you have
terminology or
economic
Oh my
power.
God,
No,
that
that's
don't even make sense.
ridiculous. That is
But it's
ridiculous.
about a collective.
Wait,
It's really not
And,
about. It's
and
not
frankly,
about
for
an
you to claim
It's
that
individual.
not
there are
about
black people with no power is
individuals.
It's not about an
ridiculous and
individual.
racist
It's
too.
about a collective.
It's not.
But I just wanted to say.
100%.
I just wanted to say this really quick.
wait. Can I just say out really quick? It's more of the audience to see. I'm reading the dictionary here. Racism here is discrimination based off race. You can read the dictionary too, and well, maybe the modern ones have been revised after the BLM story, which is what happened with one of them. But no, it's just funny because when I make a point, his first response is, "Are you white?" So because I'm making an articulate point that may not agree with him, his first reaction is to question what race
No,
I.
because you're trying to compare yourself
As-
to another to someone that's black, and you can't. You're
That is
white. So if you go
literally
through the
what
process,
Harvard and UNC was
if
doing
you
in their
go
admissions
through the
process.
process,
Uh,
it is a white institution that
Kevin,
is will accept more white men than anyone. Now, that's the reason why affirmative action was even in place in the first place. Was
well,
because they were only accepting you, but they were not accepting black people.
What is the
No,
basis for saying
now hold
that?
on.
I mean, you say these things without foundation, and it's so racially divisive. You have an obligation in a public forum not to say and make these racially inflammatory comments, saying that institutions somehow, quote, are white and automatically engage in racist behavior. That is a prejudice
First of
that
all,
you're mixing with
that's not a
fact.
prejudice. That
It
is
is a
that is a
prejudice.
fact. You won't even
It is
acknowledge
what is the fact?
that America was
hold
built
on,
on white supremacy.
hold
And the
No, I
fact
All
that
won't.
right,
you
all
No,
right,
I
all right.
won't.
Hey guys,
No,
guys,
I
quickly
love
though,
this
quickly. Let's
country.
dial it
Stop
back.
smearing America. I
stop
mean,
it.
this is just a silly argument you're making, sir.
It ain't
It's
nothing silly.
silly
It's
and
all
it's
facts.
silly,
It's all
emotional, and
facts.
immature.
We can drop 100 different articles to show that it's all facts.
And I can.
Whether it
Oh,
is,
come
There's
on,
there is
and I
no
no
read
nuance in
history
that
too.
statement at all.
stop it.
I mean, you're making these comments.
Solomon, can you
Why
tell
do
me
you even
we
live
had
in
this
this country
conversation
if you hate
before?
it so
You
much?
don't you
Why do you live
because I
here?
built this. We built this country, not
You
you.
did,
We built this
and no one
country.
else did. No one else did.
My ancestors built this country.
Oh,
Hundreds of
and no one
thousands of
else
people
ancestors
died
were
to
involved.
emancipate.
All of the wealth. Look at all of the banks in America. Chase all of the big wealth in America. They all use
Says the real
my
estate
That's
broker.
ancestors.
crazy
They
talk.
all
That's
use black
crazy talk.
Says
people.
the real
They
estate
all
broker.
use black people for collateral to get the banks that they have. We
Well,
can
you
go
know
through
what's
every policy. You guys don't.
Jamal,
You don't like history. That's your
Jamal,
problem.
in the
Go look at
18th
real history.
century, how many countries had
Can I
emancipated
speak
slaves?
after you?
America was one of the first countries to take steps to remove slavery from the country. Yes, it took generations, it took hundreds of thousands of people dead to
Oh my
remove
God.
slavery. And of course, the South,
That's
run
not a
by
but there.
Democrats,
That's not a but. Say
did
it
Jim
again.
Crow
Say the
laws.
facts again.
But this is generations ago, Jamal. We're in 2023. Now, do you want to take steps forward
This
for
is
Black
not
Americans?
generations
We
ago when
need
we're
to move
talking about
forward
most of this
together,
stuff
Jamal.
was
You
just
are a
going on in the
stop the
1900s.
divisiveness.
You are
a Stop the wealthy real divisiveness. estate We're broker. on your side.
this is what
We're
just
on
happened
our
in the
fellow American
1900s. What are you
side.
talking about? You
I
talking
am
about
talking
generations
facts.
ago? No, it's not generations ago. Racism.
1960. When was the Civil
Oh
Rights
my God.
passed? Civil Rights Act that
Yeah, go
Democrats
ahead. You were
didn't
just
want, by
about
the
to
way.
say it. Go ahead and say when
67.
was it passed?
Come on.
You just said
Equal Rights
generations.
Act, Civil Rights Act is LBJ's administration. I mean,
Oh
come
my
on.
God.
And he didn't want it either.
I'm
He's one of the
talking
most
about
racist
you are sitting here
presidents
saying
there
that
was.
all of this stuff is generations ago when it's
What
just
does that
50
mean?
years ago.
What does that mean?
50
It's
years
wealth.
is not
You're using
hundreds of
two-parent
years.
families, wealth. They're a privilege that it's not tied to race. Race is being used as a proxy by critical Marxists to divide the
It's
country.
not. It is
Wealth,
not. If you don't
two-parent families,
believe and
safe
if you don't
communities.
believe that this
These are not
country,
off limits for people based on race, Jamal.
you don't believe in
We can
systemic
all have these
racism, if
things.
you don't believe that these systems was created on the backs of white supremacy, then I can't talk to you because you
No,
don't like
what do you mean
history.
white supremacy?
You don't like
They were from
history.
Europe. They happened to be white.
You don't like
They also,
history.
Thomas Jefferson wanted to condemn slavery because that was a British
Oh my God.
institution. It was we were British colonies, Jamal. I don't know if you're aware, but we were British colonies, and we took steps
I'm
to
not aware
remove the importation of slaves.
because I don't
That's in the
have the
Constitution.
like stop it.
3/5 clause
You
penalized the
need to
Southern
go and do
states.
the real history of your
I've
ancestors
spit in fact,
who
Southern
killed,
states
who raped, who
penalized them for having
enslaved,
slaves.
who created systems and corporations to continue
guys,
doing the same
one
thing.
one at a time. So let
Yo,
Kyle
this was
go.
18th century,
Let
my man.
You just brought up the civil rights movement that happened 50 years ago. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
it's not the same thing as
These
slavery.
things,
You're saying
these things
black
are
people
still
built this country.
happening.
You're saying
You
black
guys want
people
to act
built this
like
country,
we're
Jamal.
1,000
So
years.
all
You
of
want
the
to act
stuff
like we're
my
1,000
family
years
did,
Rights Act
fighting
was
World War
ratified in
II, that doesn't mean anything.
1866.
You know, the Great Depression, none of that means anything, Jamal. It's all about you, and it's all about black Americans versus white Americans. We have to stop this stupid, primitive way of thinking.
Kyle,
It is a primitive
First of all,
Kyle, hold
first
it
of
down,
all,
brother.
we need to
it ain't no
remove it from our
Hey,
society.
all right, Kyle, hold it down. You getting in your feelings, my guy.
Racism is
You getting
primitive.
look. In the words of Malcolm X, the Negro, and the white man must be able to sit down at the same table and discuss issues of race without one hurting the other's feelings. Right now, both of y'all getting in y'all's feelings about this
I
shit,
don't
so
feel
that ain't gonna work.
I ain't in my feelings.
Solidarity.
You just need to
Bro,
acknowledge.
both
You
of
just
y'all
need
are a
to
couple of octaves
acknowledge.
too high. Come
You
on,
just
let's
gotta-
dial it back.
Guys, way too much. I'm telling you, like, we enjoyed the debate, but it's very hard for people to listen to. Malcolm, go ahead. Malcolm, do you want to finish your point? There's a mute issue as well, so once you mute, it remutes. But anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah. All right. So again, I ain't got too much on this because once again, I don't view this decision as, groundbreaking or life changing, because if you look, people can still write essays about how, let's say, race is, how their race or how their struggles have impacted their lives. They can still include that in their admission. So to me, most of the colleges that want to promote and, promote and tout their diversity, they're going to do it. It doesn't change anything. This is just going ahead and putting it out there as in, hey, you guys, y'all been using, race and diversity in the admissions process to basically, circumvent just giving everybody a fair shake. Now you're going to have to get a little bit slick about that. And that's all it's going to do. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out why people care so hotly about this, because it's, it doesn't necessarily move the needle. I'm sorry. It's
Malcolm, can I ask you a question? So, like, from my perspective, there shouldn't be discrimination based on race because what'll happen, because it goes against the Constitution. But there should be some kind of system that takes into consideration your basically financial capability. So basically, poor people should have poor should be based on financial needs. Like, we know poor people go to worse schools, they're going to get worse results, and so therefore there should be some kind of system which gives poor people a bigger chance. So it's not based on race, but based on your financial capability. That's the way I see it, where you don't basically impact the Constitution. But what's your thoughts?
Well, it should come from the point of, okay, when you apply, we're going to look at your school. We're going to look at how people perform technically. That's where I kind of disagree when Tara says, it needs to be less standardized testing. I mean, you have to have some kind of way to see, okay, is this person just like the one diamond in the rough to stand out from a rough school district? Or is this person, sort of in a school district that has the best teachers and the best resources and all of that? I do think you need to look at that. But again, race is only a proxy for looking at how advantaged somebody is or disadvantaged. But the problem is we put black people in this massive bucket of disadvantaged. White people are automatically coming from, supreme circumstances when that's not always the case. Like I said, a rural school in, Budafuck nowhere, Nebraska, sometimes is going to have kids that basically have less than a school that's, maybe like in the inner cities of like Georgia or somewhere. It happens. I think that we got to refine the process. But affirmative actions has been basically used and abused. And it's like it was said before, white women overwhelmingly are the beneficiaries of affirmative actions. You want to pad your diversity stats? Go ahead, bring a couple of white women in, throw you some black people in. And unfortunately, the stigma is that black people get looked at as diversity hires. So, I mean, I agree with all sides, but I just think us trying to scream and holler at each other about America's racist or, oh shit, America's not racist, I think that gets you nowhere, because again, you're missing the main point, which is there is a problem, but the problem is really on the level of the resources that these areas have. So if black areas don't have, fix that.
And I think that
that's
Malcolm
why Democrats support school choice, right?
All we were saying until we were told that no systemic racism is happening and no discrimination is happening in America, and it is. So,
well, Jamal,
that's not
but
what the
here's the
argument is
problem.
about,
You're
Jamal.
literally saying that members of a specific race can't be racist. I mean,
now you're going. First of all, you're going back.
Can I please speak?
Back to that
Can
point.
I'm speaking now.
This conversation is not about.
Yeah, Jamal.
Can I please speak?
I'll let
TJ, look, we're not going to go to
John
that point because it's going to cause argument. We went past that point ages ago. Malcolm's made a call.
No, I have a
TJ, stop 1 second. 1 second, bro. So it's, Malcolm's made a cogent, salient point. He's moved the conversation along. Let's not go into the fight about.
Well,
You know,
I'm trying to go right into Malcolm's
right. I'm
point.
going to somebody else. I'm going to go to Chief. Chief, you wanted to finish one of the points, but again, we move past the other point. Yeah.
Like, you know, personal things. You know, basically the point is there actually was an interesting statistic out there that think about a third of white students lied on their admissions on their race in order to get into schools, and of those 70 or so percent who lied about their admissions on their race actually got in. So this is an issue that has been impacting, at least in that statistic, at least, or that's that study I was referring to, is impacting white students and Asian students as well. There should be no discrimination. There shouldn't really be a complicated debate or anything like that. There shouldn't be looking at this and saying, "Oh no, I don't know, if this is the right thing." No, this is basically discrimination that's been allowed, and they should be removed. And there should be legacy people who, you know, legacy things should be removed as well. I'm in favor of that. The smartest of the smartest should be able to get into schools. And also where states are, you know, selected, or more people get hired or gets put in from certain states because there's less of a population there. That should be removed as well. There shouldn't be preference for location, or race, or your gender. If you're the smartest person, you should be able to get into your school without worrying about things. And I was trying to finish a point saying that as a person who applied to college recently and, you know, went through a process of that, it was frustrating to see that, you know, you apply and you have people tell you, "Oh, if you were this group or that group, you probably would have gotten to an Ivy League," or something like that. When, you know, I mean, you do your best in school. You do volunteer work. You do leadership positions. You start your own groups. You do sports, and all that stuff is in middle class. And you still have the back of your head thought from, you know, well, if I were a different person, would I have gone to the school or anything like that? And I'm happy with where I am right now. But the point should be that students shouldn't feel that way. There should be no discrimination. It shouldn't be a complicated point. This bill is discrimination against us, and we shouldn't have it. There should be no discrimination based on that. And I'll finish up with 30 seconds. The last point is that Harvard put a statement out that talks about how they will also talk about considering admissions processes or decisions, the applicant's discussion on how race affected his or her life, be through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. So I do think that these schools will be trying to use essays as a way to get around that. And we have places like Stanford who have people who write hashtag BLM 100 times as an essay and get into school from Stanford, you know, compared to other people who write longer essays. I think it tells you that there will be attempts in trying to circumvent this decision, which is not good.
So let me go
And
to
the good news, though.
Let me go to Malcolm. Malcolm, go ahead.
Yeah, nah, I was about to just let you know I got to slide in a couple. So I'm going to just go ahead and make that point. Thank you, Chief, for backing that up once more. Again, it's not necessarily the system that's going to fix everything. It's the people that man the system. So as long as you have the, you know, the diversity over everything type, the people that want diversity for the sake of diversity, rather than wanting diversity that can actually enhance the collegiate experience, you're going to get this regardless of what system you have. So I think that's where we really, again, changing just number one, what is our value of college? Our value of college to, you know, get all of these nice stories to say, oh, well, you know, and I'm sorry to use your name, it's just what comes up. But Jamal came from, you know, the lowest of the low, but he went to Harvard, and now his family lives in this nice $250,000 suburb. He's a award, you know, he's a highly acclaimed doctor. Like, if that's what colleges want, they're going to get that. However, so I mean, you have to look at the people. Systems are going to be abused. But like I said, again, you know, I got to slide. I don't think that this is important, or, you know, because it's, the problem hadn't been addressed. Nothing's changed. Nothing's going to change. There's nothing to really worry about in this. And that's my official take. Kyle, Jamal, y'all play nice. Tira, good to see you again. I'm out.
Let me go to Reverend Tim Christopher. Reverend, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And then a similar point I made before about if we had a system which was, again, it's not, because you can't have a system where essentially it's just based on results, because again, if people go to better schools, if they go to more affluent schools, they're going to get in much more quick. They're going to get better results. So my question is to you, if they did it based on, you know, financial circumstances, poverty levels, that would largely make up black people anyway, because, and so therefore there'd be some kind of balance where affluent people would not be impacted irrespective of race, and it's a lot more looking at poverty. What's your thoughts on that? And then generally, please, I'd like to hear what your general thoughts as well.
Good evening, good afternoon, whichever one applies to you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come in here and say just a little bit. First off, I think what we have to do is look at the historical contents in this here situation, right? There was a time, I'm sure I'm probably older than a lot of people in this room, because I go all the way back to, I was born on a segregated floor in Memphis, Tennessee, where my mom couldn't go up to a certain floor because all the black kids were on the bottom floor. So when we look at that and we think about what we've had to go through, right, just to get to this here point where there was troops in front of doors to keep black people out of those schools, right? Where you got busing that even Joe Biden said what? He didn't want black kids being bused anywhere and things of that sort. So that just shows his racism. But at the end of the day, when we look at this whole situation, I wanted to talk to that young man that just left, who sits here and says that it doesn't matter. It does matter. Because if you think they're going to stop here, right? The system never stops at one place. It doesn't. Okay, let's talk about housing, right? Let's talk about jobs, people getting, I mean, they have to pass a hair act for sports and things of that sort because we wear our hair different. So I'm looking at those. I'm looking down the road. I'm looking at how the system and this government works. I'm looking at years from now. Is what's gonna happen years from now, right? Those are the things that I look at. You know, we can sit here and we can say that this situation that happened today is not going to do anything. And he's right. If you sit here and say, let's take some of the most impoverished black communities and let's pull some of the brightest kids out of there and give them the opportunity. What's the difference in what they're doing now? I would rather for them to do it that way than these white women and these white kids can't come up there, right? And get in line and be part of what should be out here to help black people, to help people who are poor. That's what I want to see. I want to see the poorest of the poor, right? Those bright kids that we don't worry about, we don't think about, we don't see, that's just going through the motions because they know they have no recourse to get anywhere at all. So they just live. I would rather see those kids get into a good school than a kid get in school because, oh, well, he's black. Oh, well, he's Asian. Oh, he's this. Give those kids the same opportunity that you're giving these kids that you're saying, well, we're going to do it because of diversity and we're going to do it because we have a quota, a number of black people or people of color. We have that number that we have to get in. We have to get in and make sure that they're part of the system.
Yeah, so Ion, I want to, I'm sorry, Ion, I want to give you an opportunity to respond here. You've been very patiently waiting here. If you want to respond to what Reverend Tim was saying and give your overall opinion, let's hear
Yeah,
it.
so I mean, I really don't think that I'm call me a conspiracy theorist, but I really don't think that this is about black people. I think that like this is all a facade and in the media to make black people and white people fight. I think that this is between like white men and white women, and I really believe that white men are concerned about white women replacing them when it comes down to the job industry and the college field, and they're using black people to do it. So every time we have these arguments, right, I hear white people talk about, oh, listen, you know, it's discriminatory, and you know, it's not fair. They're not talking about the white women because after that, just a few minutes later into the argument, they say, well, white women benefit the most. So why would it be a problem to you that that white people are actually benefiting more to this event than anybody? It would still be discriminatory towards Black people. So it's just really confusing to hear this, and I get concerned because I'm just like, I hear a lot of white women blindly follow a lot of these kind of conservative talking points, and I'm not against the conservatives. I went with the Black conservatives with Candace Owens to the White House, met Trump. He's an awesome person. But I just find it weird because it's just like, damn, they just took away your rights to have an abortion, and that.
So,
And that,
Ayan, can I ask you a question?
hold on. Let me finish. I don't want to yell. I don't want to argue. I just let me finish. I just find it weird. Like it's just the women's rights being taken away, and now like the another attack on women's rights, because we know that white women are impacted, according to y'all, the most, and then we know that the other demographic of women, Black women are considered the most educated. So it's weird to see women standing behind this. Now, for me, I agree with Michelle Obama's point and it really kind of like made me think about things a little bit differently, because as an educated person, someone who grew up in the upper middle class, I went to private school. It was very frustrating to me because I felt like people kind of always thought that like I got into spaces because I was Black, not because I came from a semi-wealthy family and I could afford to be in those spaces. And it was just really frustrating because I felt like, that I was being victimized, and I always wanted to feel affirmative action is not really going to impact me, right? But when I think about what Jamal said about how poor families are going to be impacted, not only Black communities, but other communities at that is problematic, right? And like to hear like white people or white men specifically, right? Like use this as an opportunity, and I consistently hear this, right? Where it's just like, oh, sister, like with these mini arguments, having this like throwing out like kind of like this weird, and I'm not sensitive towards it because it's just ignorant. So don't think I'm sensitive, but it's just weird to hear you like complain that the white man is under attack, but then a few minutes later say that.
Nobody's saying that.
Hold on,
I'm sorry.
I'm
That's
not talking about you.
misconstruing what people.
It
No, you're
wasn't you.
slandering
It
people
wasn't.
right
It
now. I
wasn't
want
you.
to
It
hold
was
you up
not
there.
you. I'm not talking about you. But it's weird to also now hear y'all say that white men are under attack, but then also say that systemic oppression.
This guy.
Systemic oppression doesn't exist. That does not make sense. You're contradicting your
Literally, nobody is
Kyle. You
saying
were
that.
not
The
here.
second
You were
thing is
not here.
women outnumber
Kyle,
men in
relax,
colleges. It's
relax. Why are you
fact.
so?
So where did the
Kyle,
patriarchy go?
relax. Calm down. It's okay. Relax. Let me finish, and I will give you an opportunity to speak.
This
You don't.
casual
You don't need to
degradation of
be.
people
You
based on
don't
their
need to
When
sexuality.
be.
white
You don't
men
need.
get
It's
poked,
okay.
that's what
It's
happens.
okay, Kyle. Just calm down a second. I know that this is frustrating to you, but I also want to say, if y'all cared about white males not going to school, let me tell you what the real problem is. There's this big, a large amount of white men who are going to school and dropping out, and there's actually studies where they're actually creating programs. Y'all want to talk about racism? Creating programs for white males to feel more comfortable to go to school. The privilege of that. Can you imagine that? Like males are like, you have it in a society where
That's
they
not
can
happening.
create programs.
It'd be crazy for a
I
minority,
will link it.
I
I will link
guess,
it.
like scholarships
But
and things,
but
right?
It is
just
happening.
to
Right, 1 second, guys. Too many people interrupting. Ayan, if you want to finish your point in 15 seconds, I'm going to give Kyle an opportunity to respond, and then we're going to go to Voltaire. But continue, Ayan. It's Ayan, if you want to just unmute and just summarize your point in 15 seconds, I'll just finish it off.
okay, sorry. I don't. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
right,
can hear
I'm
you.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Ayan.
I'm used to Clubhouse not here, but just to have that happening, and I'll link it in the chat once I find the way how to do this, because it's like my first time over here. But like to have that happening and people just talking about affirmative action is taking out white males. White males are becoming more lazier, according to these red pill dudes, and they don't want to go to school, so it's not impacting them. They don't want to go. Just say that you're lazy and stop making excuses for these young boys, and actually be in their lives and do what you have to do and stand up and be men like y'all say y'all are, or get Andrew Tate or some of these dudes out here to actually make a difference. Period. So stop trying to
Right.
blame
All
everybody.
right, Ayan. May
Right.
I
Okay, let's
respond?
go to 1 second. 1 second. Let me go to Kyle because let Kyle respond.
All
Kyle,
right.
go ahead.
May I say that it's just surreal the way that woke progressives casually deride and disparage people based on
We're
their
not
skin color
progressive.
or their gender. No, that's exactly what's happening. You just said white people are lazy, like all of this stuff. I
He just
understand that you
told
want
you he went
equity
with
because
Candace Owens to the White House. So why you calling him a progressive?
All right. No. Stop. I'm making a general point. I'm
Trump
not talking.
2024.
It's not just him. You see it anywhere on Twitter. You see it everywhere. Stop disparaging, dehumanizing, degrading, slandering, smearing people based on their skin color and their gender and all of this stuff. And you guys can't even follow that general rule yourself. You are constantly combating people, saying not to
you
be
want to get
prejudiced,
rid of
while being
race
prejudiced
so
against
bad
white
that's why
people.
we're here. You want to get
I'm
rid of
sorry
race
you're
so
mad
bad
that this
that's
is a
why we're in this
fact.
position in America now.
It's just funny because we had a point.
It's not equity to attack people based on their race or their sex or their gender. That's not getting equity. That's just being
No one has ever black people attack no one. We just
Dude, you
speaking
literally
our
attack
reality.
white
This is
people
such a
No,
joke.
2 seconds
it's
ago.
funny because
You're acting like the CRT industry doesn't exist. Come on, my man. Come on.
Okay, but see, the critical race industry existing is based off of what? Wanting to erase a certain portion of history so America doesn't.
That's a lie. It's a myth.
Okay.
We don't want to
You are so angry. Relax.
revision of it.
Let's be realistic.
Kyle, you gotta calm down. But let me say
Maybe I'm
this.
too loud. I'm sorry.
Solomon, listen. Solomon
It's
asked this
accidental.
question.
I'm just trying to debate.
He asked this simple question. His simple question was, should it be moved based on financial status? Now, the answer to that is, let me tell you something. The reality is that black people are owed for building all of these institutions. Let's go to history. Let's go, and I don't want nobody to start yelling. Be quiet and listen, and you can talk after I'm done. Let's go to history. I'll link many articles. Slaves built Harvard. Slaves cooked the meals and were the maids and everything for the presidents for many, many years. Slaves did all of those things. The bank that was used for Harvard, the Harvard bank, because I'm telling you that based off the fact that we've had many slaves that have built these institutions and the banks that have built these institutions, it is a travesty to say that anything that would hurt black people, their lineage, from going to get a quality education that they helped build.
Jamal, that's great. That's great. And I'm not trying to take anything away from your ancestors, but you did not do those things. Just like nobody alive today enslaved anyone and made them.
If you are spending your money and investing so that your kids and their kids and their kids can have a better life, that's what white people do. White people create
discriminating against Asian Americans.
Guys, let Kyle respond, and then Jamal, I'll let you jump in. Go ahead, Kyle. Kyle got on mute. Bottom right hand corner.
No, you're right. Harvard is a racist institution. It was being racist against Asian Americans. It was not properly giving people entrance into the university based on their merit. It was taking improper consideration. Now, all things being equal, a black American from a poor district with not a lot of resources should, all things being equal, be accepted, because we do want diversity in the sense that we want people of all different backgrounds to have their voices heard and to contribute to the conversation at universities. And we want all students to be exposed to people from different backgrounds, from different parts of the country. So I think I do think that I think that the essay still has a place in this because, obviously, we have to look at America where it is now. And I agree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg that, maybe when she made the decision, Grutter, I believe, I'm not a lawyer, but it's Grutter, she said in 25 years we might not need it, right? But maybe we're not there yet. There should be some representation of college students at our universities. That isn't was going on at Harvard.
You just said there should be some representation of college students at universities. What did you mean? You just said there should be some representation of college students at universities.
So what I'm saying, all things being equal.
College. No. Which students at universities? You said college students. You just made a mistake. I'm trying to figure your argument.
Students entered into college, right? So
there should be some representation of who?
Of college students from different backgrounds at universities.
Different backgrounds, got it.
Because it's good for the university for people to have to argue ideas against people from different parts of their community, of different communities and different backgrounds in different parts of the country. I think it's generally fine because America when you're in the business world, you have to be exposed to people, different backgrounds. I think that's perfect. That's fine, but you cannot have like bigoted or biased standards. You cannot
Okay,
penalize
Kyle,
Asian
this is the
Americans.
thing. If you're going to use Kyle, if you're going to use
Look,
business as the whole representation, right? Let's
I'm
talk
not.
business. Okay, let's just talk American infrastructure when we're trying to tie in how all of this ties to this whole affirmative action, right? In order for a college to exist, the foundation of this country, the soil, it had to be plowed, people had to work on it, people had to build a solid foundation for any infrastructure to sit upon it. This is just basic logistics, right? And we have to understand what period of time that existed in order for us to move forward and talking about anybody attending any type of college education institution, even high school, right? So if you're going to say that these things exist based off that business infrastructure, then we have to tie in labor laws, rights, wages, and all of that stuff that's been implemented because people don't want to do work for free now. Nobody in the business world is trying to work today for absolute free, right? So we have to think about a time period in history in which the infrastructure was developed and people had to work for free. And in business, we know that as a debt owed, especially over so many period of time. When we do loans from the bank, we accumulate interest. And you have to figure out if you're trying to have an honest conversation in any aspect of 2024 to 2097, you have to be realistic enough to include, since we're doing all inclusiveness, you can't be afraid of adding that portion of history inside of the all-inclusive category, keeping it business-oriented, meaning no feelings attached. It's just the reality. This part of business exists. We got to figure out how to organize a plan to address it and move forward with bigger pictures, right?
So, but the thing is that affirmative action of the past was meant to do that. And as Grutter pointed out, it wasn't we might not need it, it's we expect
But if
we
it
will not
didn't
need it.
happen, Kyle, then you know it didn't exist.
This isn't
Regardless,
Kyle. This
I mean,
isn't
TJ,
Kyle.
my apologies, TJ. But I'm saying if it didn't actually happen and people are still experiencing the atrocities, right? We talked about this earlier, type of harassment, then I'm entitled to encourage that to the next person. Don't do business with them because we're talking business and networking. So if they've been doing harassing business tactics towards me, I'm going to tell the next individual that's in my immediate community, don't go over there. Save yourself the
But
time.
that's the entire problem with using race, though, is because the racial categories, as Justice Gorsuch very rightly points out, is extremely broad to where you can't do that based on that ground. Like, just to quote Justice Gorsuch, the quote unquote white category sweeps in anyone from Europe, Asia, west of India, and North Africa. That includes those of Welsh, Norwegian, Greek, Italian, Moroccan, Lebanese, Turkish, or Iranian descent. It embraces an Iraqi or Ukrainian refugee as much as a member of the British royal family. Meanwhile, Black or African American covers everyone from a descendant of enslaved persons who grew up poor in the rural South to a first-generation child of wealthy Nigerian immigrants to a Black identifying applicant with multiracial ancestry whose family lives in a typical American suburb. The fact is like the best way to address anything, if you're trying to get rid of any sense of inequity, economics is your way out. Race is not the
I
way to do it.
disagree. I disagree.
I mean,
When we
I
the
know
only
you.
reason the
But
only
this is
reason that is
real
I
quick,
let many people
Jamal.
many
Just
people speak. It was my turn.
Wait,
5 people have
Jamal,
spoken.
hang on.
just let
Jamal,
me respond to him real quick, and I swear it won't take.
Right, let Jamal respond, and then we're gonna. I think Nick has a question for Voltaire. So go ahead, Jamal.
Okay, the point of the matter is, and why race is important here, is because when you look at all of these years since slavery, and we go on down the line on how they have put systems in place to still enslave, policies in place, mass incarceration, war on drugs. We can go on and on and on and on. Redlining, which is still going on today. Last time we had this conversation, I told you guys how I fought Chase Bank a couple of years in 2020 and made them give back $1 billion to Chicago because they were redlining us, only giving 1.9% of the time to the South and West Sides. So the fact that we cannot continue to act like these things are not continuing to happen today, and just like Kyle said, maybe we're not there yet. When you talk about 24 years, we're not there. We're not there. There are still very white supremacists or racist people over many institutions that still discriminate and are racist. And so you
Can you
have
name
to
any?
have,
And as you just
and then
proved,
when you
you
talk, hold
have a
on, let me
remedy
finish.
available.
Let me finish. And then when you talk about the fact that all of these institutions, every institution, when we go through America, even these institutions that they dissented on today from Harvard and UN, if we look at every institution and all of these banks, we look at everything. Our ancestors, my great 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 grandmother, my great 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 grandfather. So when you guys talk about legacy, because when you invest and you play with your money right now, you're trying to make sure that your kids have a better opportunity than you have today. So to say that my ancestors a few generations ago or a couple generations ago or just 100 years, 50 years ago, civil rights movement, that they did free labor to the presidents of Harvard, free labor to build the banks use them as collateral to get their wealth, free labor, and the fact that their next generation or the generation after that cannot get into college.
You're conflating it. That was the 19th century.
It'd be mandated that their lineage gets into college, and there's too much, and it's giving them too much control to stop that is a travesty. So
Jamal,
no,
what resource
I think that it's just ironic.
One second.
I think it's just ironic that
one
a
second,
real
one
estate
second, one second.
broker
TJ,
is the one talking about power.
TJ, let's go to Nick. Nick, you got a question for Voltaire, I believe.
Yeah, Voltaire. So I want you to kind of go over this just a little bit because you know a question that we're getting a lot from the audience, and I do want to remind the audience, bottom right hand corner, we are reviewing the questions. The team is going through them pretty ferociously because there are a lot of questions. But I want to ask you, Voltaire, as an attorney, what part of this is unconstitutional? What is the justification for barring affirmative action in college admissions? What are your thoughts? Voltaire, bottom left.
Hey, yeah, I heard you. I'm just driving. It's really as simple as this. They overturned Grutter. First of all, we basically, this room has covered a lot of things that were discussed in the opinion. And the bottom line is, these admission programs have to apply with strict scrutiny because they discriminate on the basis of race. The problem with that is when Grutter was handed down in 2003, the court
okay, so hold on one second, Voltaire. What is, you're talking about Grutter? What is Grutter? Just a brief summary.
Yeah, Grutter held that admissions, college admissions, could consider race as what's called a plus factor. In other words, for a long time, colleges were trying to basically set out if there were 100 spots for a college program, a college would say, okay, we want 15 of them to go to black people, 15 to go to Hispanics, and the rest can go to whites and whoever else. And that was ruled unconstitutional a long time ago in 1978. So colleges started doing this thing, this kind of nebulous admissions practice where they would they call it a holistic review, and that's maintains until this day, where they say that race is just a plus factor, where you consider their background, their SAT scores, their essays, their extracurriculars, and everything else. And at the end of the day, if there's a black person applying versus a white person applying, if they're relatively equal, the college is fine to pick the black person over the white person on the basis that they're black. That was overturned today, and it's actually really simple. When that decision is made, first you have to understand that college admissions is a zero-sum game. So if there are 1,000 spots for a freshman class, if 2 people are equal on scores, extracurriculars, and everything else that's objectively measurable and that's fair to measure, if a college decides that, okay, between John and James is black, John is white, we're going to pick James because he's black, because we think that there is something inherently meaningful to a freshman class that's racially diverse. The court pushed back on that today,
which is stupid.
okay, which I could get into. But the basic idea is that when that decision is made, that decision we know is a decision that's made based on race. And when that
But
happens,
you
it triggers
proven you
scrutiny.
actually proved a great point. You are
Hang on.
saying
How about
Can
just
you
Hang
quit
on.
interrupting everyone, Jamal?
yeah, let
Yeah,
me just,
when that happens,
That's
it
what you
triggers
did
what's
a minute
called.
ago.
No, I didn't. Strict
Vol-
scrutiny.
Voltaire, go ahead. Just wrap your point up in 15 seconds. Then I'll let Jamal respond. Go ahead, Voltaire.
I can't do 15 seconds. So if you want to let him respond, you can.
Right, cool. Yeah, go ahead, Jamal. Respond. Jamal, just unmute bottom left. Jamal, do you want to respond? It's bottom left. If not, I'll let Voltaire continue. Right, Voltaire, continue your point. And
So this is it's veiled in a lot of jargon, but it's really simple. If a college is going to make an admission decision based on race that triggers strict scrutiny, now you can technically do that, but you have to pass a test whereby you say we have a compelling interest for discriminating on the basis of race, and in discriminating on the basis of race, we're doing it in the most narrowly tailored way possible. And so for years, what colleges have been saying is that, well, there's something inherent. Our compelling interest is that if we have a racially diverse student body, that is inherently meaningful. It helps, it has all these wonderful things. It's rainbows and butterflies and whatever. And the court for years has been fine with that. And so what college admissions do then is they construct monoliths based on race. All white people are privileged, all black people are unprivileged, or they don't score well on tests and they need a leg up to get into college. And the court pushed back on that today. They said, look, we've been allowing college admissions programs to discriminate on the basis of race for decades because they say that we need a diverse student body because, it helps the discourse, it brings in new ideas. But in reality, that compelling interest that they're telling us, it's not amenable to judicial scrutiny, which means there's no standards by which to measure whether this is ever working. We're just taking colleges' words for it when they say, trust me, we need a racially diverse body, and it's great. You just have to trust us. So what the court said today is that's no longer going to fly anymore. College admissions is a zero-sum game, and if you're going to discriminate on the basis of race, you actually have to have an objective, measurable reason for doing so, and to do it as narrowly tailored as possible. So what does this mean? In the past, they say, well, in order to get different experiences from across the country, different backgrounds, different, students from different houses of different wealth categories or whatever, we're going to use race to do this.
okay, so let me go to Tira to respond. Tira, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I'm laughing because the idea that college is merit-based, that admissions to Harvard is merit-based in general is sort of really nonsensical. If you know anything about their process, they give legacy preferences, they give athlete preferences, they give wealthy kids who happen to know a dean of students who can write a recommendation preferences. This is not just Harvard, okay? This is all top schools and competitive schools. And quite frankly, even if you look beneath that, what you'll see is kids with money have more opportunities for tutoring so that they can get higher scores on test scores, et cetera. So I just think this idea that we're living in a society where we get rid of this one tip factor and it's going to be merit-based is really nonsensical if you actually know how these things work. That's number one. That's not really to do with the opinion, but that is the backdrop against which everybody's making these arguments. But oh my God, it's all going to be merit. No, merit is nonsense. And not only is it nonsense, what you're basically saying and what the group that was, what one of the tenets of what the group that was arguing for this case, which it won, was saying that you just should look at objective measures, right? If you look at, test scores, for example, Asian students generally have to achieve higher test scores, et cetera, as if test scores is a metric necessarily that is particularly relevant. Now, I've said this before. I believe that what's going to happen here is colleges will go and stop the use of some of the more objective metrics. They don't really need to do test scores. I think the essays are going to become increasingly important. I agree with Suleiman that I do think here's the reason why a lot of schools don't use economic factors, because the financial aid decision is completely separated from the admissions decision. So the admissions officers are not even supposed to know that kids have applied for financial aid. Now, there are ways that you can mention in your essays, etc. But basically, what will have to happen at some of these schools, and I think it will, is
Harvard
they
has an entire scoring process. They have a 5-point scoring process in admissions, and one of them is financial eligibility.
excuse me, can I just finish? There are many schools
I just
that
want to catch the
basically,
fast.
you know what? I'm going to pit my knowledge against yours in these instances. There are many schools that basically will not consider financial aid in the admissions process. So they actually knock off that portion of the comment app, which asks, are you applying for financial aid? You don't have to look at certain factors, okay? So they will not look at that in the admissions decision per se. Now, sometimes they look at it if you get to waiting lists, or sometimes when they're going to the LOP portion of the situation, some colleges will then sort of say, oh, we're going to factor that back in, et cetera, because we don't have enough money, blah, 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 or we want more kids who have economic need, et cetera. But basically, they're going to have to change the processes a little bit. I think that they can do this. I think this court has been disingenuous, and I've said it before. The Grutter decision, written, by the way, Kyle, by Sammy O'Connor, not by Ruth Ginsburg. The Grutter decision basically said that we hope things will be different in 25 years, so we won't need this. It didn't say 25 years is a cutoff, and by the way, 25 years is 2028, not today, but so be it. Okay, what I'm saying is that was not oh, it must be done by then. And moreover, I believe, particularly with the University of North Carolina, can I just finish? I'm almost done. With the University of North Carolina, I believe that particular admissions process was pretty, it had a little bit of a factor for race, but it really wasn't race as a determining factor, as some people have tried to claim. So I think, and also we've never really looked at, we can't analyze this. In other cases, the court was perfectly prepared to analyze. What is going on? Hello?
Like, I don't understand how you all keep having this conversation saying, I don't think, in shoes you don't have to walk in. Like, stop saying what you don't think about a lifestyle you don't have to live in. A lot of us understand what's going on here. And it's, again, our lifestyle of repetitive processing that has never been addressed. It's the transparency. We talk about equality so much. And again, here we are, whole. It does not matter who you are, as long as you're able to get to college and you graduated high school. Very basic, very simple, very equal. However, we keep promoting this political agenda for a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like, what are we making, the Powerpuff Girls here? Can we please get realistic with the conversation? Some of us are way too old to be having this same conversation. It's like, are you trying to drag it on for another 50 years just so you can say you did just enough? This is where we got to stop talking about racism isn't an application and we need to take it out because you used it to mandate the infrastructure. I clearly know, logically, every single citizen of the United States did not have a slave. So y'all got to stop bouncing off that old ass narrative. We get that already.
So my point is, you're holding on to some ethereal, non-quantifiable
We're addressing the direct
notion
impact of what you
that
have neglected.
you're pulling this out that nobody
Kyle,
can
come
judge
on. Let me land this plane, Kyle.
because of that.
Kyle, I've never seen a man jump in front of a landing plane. I swear to God, I've never seen it. So just let me land this safely on the tarmac, and I promise you can speak right after me. So all I'm saying, bro, is when we keep talking about what isn't available and why we keep addressing it and talking about it, is because this is what was actually used to create an infrastructure. Not only that, people manifested off of that. Again, we've talked about it, even for healthcare with COVID, right? Complacency does not mean that you're innocent. So if you understand something wrong is happening and you still don't take the objective to actually address it, you're a part of the problem. So if you don't want to be a part of the problem anymore, take a little integrity, show that you actually are going to walk the talk you're saying. If you really stand with people, then that means in a military sense, right? Because I served the country. We keep forgetting I'm a veteran. I protected all of you. And it didn't matter what your skin color was because it didn't matter. My job was to protect everybody, all walks of life, right? My life could get killed for all of you. So if I could understand entire equality with transparency, I don't get how I come back home after going overseas, away from my family, doing all this stuff to come back and find out the people who got the power to run this stuff and just make the difference are refusing to do it. We could all just come together and make this really, really easy, but we keep wanting to use this terminology that, hey, I didn't never make a Webster's dictionary. Let's just be real. Never made Webster's, never made a school, but we get where I'm going with
Yeah.
that.
So
Bills,
So
thank you
I
for
pretty
your
much,
service. I respect you doing that for us, and I appreciate that 100%. So I just want to go back a little bit to what the purpose of colleges and universities in American society. What is the role of that? Because I think that's really a debate that we should get into beyond this, because it's apparent to me from listening to a lot of progressives that they view the role of colleges and universities to be socially engineering incubators for them to try to bring people together and to get them on board their agenda and to go out into society and to be activists. Whereas my point of view is that they're institutions of higher learning that train people for life skills. It should have the best and the brightest based on objective qualities and characteristics, and that should be their primary purpose. And then the secondary purpose should be for finding people who have talent, have ability, who don't have means, like objective means, like what Suleiman was saying. They've been deprived of means, but they have talent to contribute to society. And so those people should, get consideration for scholarships and for be rewarded to have opportunity to be around mentors who can really make them into great contributors to American society. I think colleges and universities have really just gotten bigger, way too big for American society. They play too much of a role in it, as far as I'm concerned. I think that young Americans view it as colleges and universities as the gateway to being successful in American society, and when that is not the case, I think that in a lot of ways you can find your own way. You become an apprentice. You can go to trade schools and do very well for yourself and your family.
see, Kyle, there
So
we
I,
go.
I just
Once
think
again,
that
we're forgetting.
colleges are really where a lot of these ideologies that I see in American society I view them as very deleterious to civil discourse and to us mutually understanding one another, because just they want to radically transform American society, and that is where they get their meaning in life. It's not from religion. It's not from working in a business. It's not from providing for their family. They just see active. We can't even
Kyle, come
talk
on,
to each
Kyle.
other and
The
understand each other because we don't see
Kyle,
the
come
roles
on,
of
reason
universities
with
as
me
the
real
same.
quick, Kyle.
I think that's the backdrop.
But Kyle, I'm asking you to reason with me. Like, let's be men here, real quick. Like, is it just
University, 4-year university, where I got a triple major with the highest honors twice at that university. Then I went to graduate school. Then I went to doctoral school. So yeah, I did come from a poor. I don't know. Am I allowed to say it wasn't privileged? I don't know. Am I breaking some kind of rule if I say that I wasn't privileged? I don't know. But
But I
anyways,
mean, see,
I've
that's
had to
you
go
making
through.
a
I,
decision
I
from
lived
a
in South
basis.
Carolina, went to
Exactly.
majority
Kyle, there
black
you go again.
schools,
How can you ask
multiple
yourself a
majority
question and
black
then
schools,
answer
where I
for
was a
yourself?
minority.
Like,
I was one of the few white students.
come on,
So
Kyle.
I
How
don't
can you
really need to
ask
be
a question?
lectured on this.
Wait,
Kyle,
Admiral, just let Kyle finish his point, please, and then I'll go to you. Oh, Carl's gone. So let me go to Chad. Chad, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Sorry, Nick, I'll go to you. Sorry. Yeah, let me go to Chad, and then Nick can ask a question you want. Chadico, what do you think what's your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a very interesting, very interesting, what do I call like evolution of the discourse over this topic that I've been hearing. I've been cognizant of affirmative action for probably like the better part of 10 years. I want to say back in like 2011, so I was like 12 years or something like that. What I've noticed though is I hear a lot of black people complaining about this change. I also keep hearing that white women are the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action. I also have noticed that a lot of ignoring of basic reality gets factored into this thing whenever people are talking about it. You know, there's all sorts of things that are preventing Black people from like succeeding in America. And one of them is not their inability to go to school. And taking this away, I think, you know, I think they're still going to get into school. I think you're still going to have liberals who are still going to abide by you know, affirmative action rulings and, you know, make those decisions in their places of work. I think that the liberals that ultimately support this decision have completely embedded themselves in educational institutions, in HR departments all over this country. And so, like, I think that perhaps like the letter of law changing will not actually change the outcome and reality of this. But to be quite honest, I mean, it's not Blacks' inability to get into schools that's holding them back. It's the absolutely atrocious level of crime that you find in Black communities. Quite frankly, as a mixed race person myself, you know, I don't want to be related or I don't want to be like associated with the negative behavior that Blacks on the whole will engage in. Well, maybe not on the whole. It's what 1/3 of them that have been in prison or something like that. Um, you know, I don't want white people and Chinese people to like look at me and think like, oh, you know, I'm gonna come up and jack they shit or something like that. You know what I mean? That's not something that I want to be associated with. But this always seems to get ignored whenever talking about this. You know, there's so many things that hold Black people back, and you know, I would say it's perhaps the fact that they're getting into fights in public schools and the videos are getting recorded and posted on worldstarhiphop.com. I think that it's the fact that, you know, they're involved in gang related violence. Something like what, like 50% of gangs or something like that in America are made up of Black people. That's from a CDC report. That's so high for 13% of the population. You know, they should only be 13% of gangs. But, you know, you see like literally like what, 3 or 4 times their population percentage represented in gang membership rates. And so, you know, I mean, these are really the things that we need to consider, not the fact that, you know, their SAT scores were low and they still got into college at one point. And now they're not going to
But
be able to get into
talking
college
about how
at
the
all the same
statistical
levels
data
of,
is
excuse me, I'm
extremely
speaking, man, I'm
biased,
speaking.
right?
Just,
I mean, that's
hold
all I'm
on.
saying.
You'll have the opportunity to respond to me.
Yep.
Just let me
Yeah,
finish.
Admiral, I'll let you respond here very shortly. Yeah. Chanako, if you want to wrap up here in
Yeah,
like
yeah,
10,
yeah.
15 seconds, and we'll let Admiral respond.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, you know, again, it's like, you know, we'll talk about this like topical thing that's changed now, that's been, you know, part of American society for the better part of what, like 60 years now or something like that. But, you know, we won't talk about the other problems that actually are going to, you know, cause Black people like very serious real world harm. You know, we need to change their behavior, not the institutions around them. You know, you can put like pigs inside of a university, but they're not going to become like astrophysicists and like get to the moon and shit. You can put humans in a university and they're going to become astrophysicists and get to the moon. You know, I mean, and that's just what it is. It's like I think that we're like literally dealing with a group of people who are being called people but not behaving like people, and we really need to be cognizant of that. And you know, if you're a Black person, you're listening to this and you're not part of that, I commend you. In fact, I look up to you as the highest form of humanity that exists in society. I'm not castigating all Black people in my saying this, but I am saying that we do have a serious problem of Black people not behaving like people, and anyone can
Yeah,
respond.
yeah,
I
Admiral.
don't
All
want
right,
to say
so
that, but hey, can I
Well,
just say this,
yeah,
Nick? Because
real quick,
I
hold on,
wanted to
hold
say
on.
this when I got on, and I'll leave because
Valter, I'll let you respond right after Admiral because I told him he could respond. So Admiral, go ahead, and then I'll let Valter speak.
Yeah, big shout out to you, Nick, and shout out to everybody that's always supported, everybody and the listeners too, man. This is a dope conversation. So, you know, just to respond to what that narrative was that he was getting at, is more of just a troll, right? We don't have to listen to that stuff anymore. Like we as a
Would
community
you like me to
understand
post
that.
the statistics in the jumbotron that I'm citing?
Please mute your mic, sir. So again, like I was saying, it's like one of those things where we understand as a community what we can do to advance and progress. The funny thing is I don't know if I'm in the twilight zone with everybody when we all just believe that the problem that's offending us isn't the problem offending the other 75% of the American population too. You know, like the same thing that's fucking us over, which is tax dollars, inflation, and how difficult it is to buy actual organic food and groceries, is the same thing whooping everybody else's ass. And that's why you're all having these Twitter spaces and you're like having these conversations, right? So it's like funny when we try to say the only thing holding us back. No, the same thing that you didn't ever think was going to hold you back is now holding you back as well. And that's the truth about it. When you didn't think it would finesse you, it's right in your back door, snatching everything you don't have and putting you in the same pedestal. You actually get to kick it with us more at rock bottom now, and you don't know how to survive it. But this is where we've been for the entire, existence of the Western Hemisphere. And y'all just didn't think we were actually paying attention in schools. You didn't think we actually kept up with the science classes or what was going on. This is why I'm having an English said conversation with you all. You understand exactly what I'm saying because I sound very articulate in my speech, right? Who do you think I learned that from? Not us. It had to be one of your institutions that I had to attend. And, when you excel and get straight A's and, those 4.0s and all that good stuff, yeah, you don't think that we're smart enough to understand beyond the basic application system that the H&R department, human resources, where humans are the resources for the business infrastructure that keeps it moving. Also, because I was in, with 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force out there in Okinawa, Japan. I'm one of those Black people that lived around the world, so I understand logistics globally. I understand humanitarian aid globally. And when I actually have this conversation back at home, it's extremely disappointing. I'm sorry, don't leave like that. But I just want to understand, like, I'm making this point, I'll land this plane again so we can get back to it, that we're talking about the fact that this country has decided to overturn something that it shouldn't have never had to go through in order for us to have an existence into the college institution to begin with. We should have been allowed free access from just the basic fact that we helped develop. Helped off blood, sweat, and tears. People keep getting it fused like it just that period it stopped. No, it's 2024. That period came, it went, but some of us actually remember the history books. Everybody else tends to do that whole thing with celebrities when they go all, do some dope thing for 24 hours on social media. And then like the next week, you're on to something else, right? Let's stay focused and remember what this is actually about. Because even when we do fix this government together, right? We got to make sure that the institutions we're going to be pushing our children and our children's children into are going to be able to not have to have these conversations again, right? That's the whole point of us actually doing this. Well, let's do it right the first time.
Like,
If I can ask two questions, but because make a point and ask two quick questions, because the first point is that I think that the comment about the lack of integrity when it comes to college admissions is absolutely spot on. We see it because colleges are motivated by money and also retention rates. Retention rates comes in within legacies and also points. We see it within fraternity models. We also see that also enveloped within the higher education process too. So that's a very fair point to make. But my two questions are: one, is does racism exist today? And then two, is there a point of where, for those who believe that affirmative action should still exist, is there a point where affirmative action should stop existing? And I do also want to make, and sorry, one final point is that I want to be persnickety in terms. Saying that there is systemic racism does not mean that things are inherently racism or inherently cannot be racist. There is a point to that. So I think that we have to be persnickety with those terms because we do see racism. Racism is learned. Hate is learned. But that doesn't mean that things are or cannot stop being racist or hateful. Those things can be distinguished. So again, two questions. Is there racism today? And then two, if affirmative action is needed, is there a point of where it's not needed? And if so, what does that look like?
Okay, so if I could
Sean?
I just have there's other points though. Like,
Well, let's first because we brought Deshaun up here. Let's let you answer that question, Deshaun. Welcome up to the panel. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here. I'll just answer Michael's question with 2 points. 2015, I did. I was a part of a lawsuit against Ally Bank. They were charging minorities a higher interest rate than black people. They actually went to court and lost that one. Yes, I got my little $35 check in the mail. So to that point, interesting enough, we're talking about college admissions, and nobody's talking about urban education and how racism has plagued that area for decades. I mean, we're going back and forth from college, we're talking about crime, but nobody has mentioned education and how it has affected our children and how it still affects our children today. I mean, all you have to do is go into an urban school that is majority black and look how, you know, our black children are treated. Look how they're taught. Look how they're disciplined, specifically our black boys. So when we ask a question like that, I think we don't need to look no further than education, right? And I think we are missing that point on this stage. And I'll leave it there for right now.
The point is, I was trying to just to bring up quickly, like this entire argument is specifically about the Supreme Court action banning affirmative action, and there's been a lot of just random points. To get back to the main issue here, the act itself should be condemned as the actual affirmative action premise should be condemned as discrimination, and I think we can get a consensus on that point. So before we're talking about different other issues about whether systemic racism is real or a variety of other factors that do contribute to how students get into colleges or not, we should be addressing first that main issue, and then we can probably move on to the root of different problems. But I still want to make sure for people who are here, and I guess who may not agree with this or not, do you think that this actual the Supreme Court action is justified, and do you think that it was in fact racist against certain groups? Because I haven't heard consensus on that. Some people have said yes, and others, I think someone left, Jamal left, but some disagree with that. So for those who are here, just want to get a clear stance on where you guys are on that. But in general, though, I guess the point about urban education has an impact. Yeah, that's true, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there should be no discrimination against people based on their race in admissions processes. So it doesn't really talk about that main issue.
Just a quick point. The topic of systemic racism and then if racism was applied today is relevant because it was the point in the O'Connor opinion in which stated affirmative action should be allowed for the next 25 years because we're still dealing with it. So if we're still dealing with racism, we're going back to the previous opinion, which has
Look, let me
relevancy
address it
today.
real quick, brother. Like, look, you call me Admiral Black Wolf, call me Black Wolf. You don't have to, like, be afraid. I know Jamal is the cool guy, probably, token kid like South Park. I get the show, man. It's pretty dope. And it's funny sometimes. So just laugh a little and breathe. But look, is racism still existing? We all understand terminology, right? So if you go to the book and you search up racism and it tells you it's an idea, an ideology. And we know what an idea is, right? Like, I just thought of one. Let me see if I can get in touch with Mario so we can have this conversation. So shout out to you, Mario, for letting us make this conversation actually happen, right? So with this idea and the understanding of it, as long as people support an idea, let's use another example like LGBTQ unity. Hey, as long as people get behind it in society, this starts becoming existent. That's how the dollar bill came to life, right? So here we are looking at ideas, innovations turn into actual societal influences. And this is why we have social media influencers. So the reality is, if people are still practicing this ideology, then it is still here. And when we say, should affirmative action still be around? Well, think about it. Affirmative action is an immediate just decision to make something happen. Apparently, something is going on that shouldn't be, right? And in this sense, we can't keep overlooking history. These institutions had to be developed on an infrastructure. People manifested off those infrastructures and that development. So, if we're going to address labor laws and wages through history and how people were doing labor unions and strikes, then we have to be all inclusive, since that's what we want to do, right? We want to be all inclusive. That means everybody, we the people, meaning we is not I, meaning the few people that are actually making these decisions got to stop doing that 1% makes a decision for 99%. I don't understand how you all are scholars and you don't understand we let 99% controlled by 1%. The math ain't mathing, right? So let's just say affirmative action would be us collectively with 10,000 deep in this space deciding to network with each other and having more further conversations, expanding that diversity that we talk about we don't need, but actually understanding it's the beneficial way of the world. This is how spices got from China to America, and this is how oil got from one country to the next, right? So let's be logistically sound and realistic in our conversation, right? As much as we want to refuse it, if the world was on pure equality, everybody would be in their own tribalistic mindsets and we wouldn't have any issues in the world, right? That's not the world we live in, right? So let's have a real conversation, fellas. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's gonna bite anybody's heads off through the phone. Like,
Right.
And that's a good point. And I also recommend The Righteous Mind by John Haidt. He goes into that and how boring of a world if we were all truly equal and also truly equal in thought.
So, but the point I was making, I don't think you guys addressed what Stent was talking about, because we talk about a lot of different issues, but 99%, 1%, and a variety of other things. I was trying to get this back to what the justification is for affirmative action, and why, in this case, you think that actually, I'm not even sure your position really say it specifically, but in general, the justification for allowing discrimination on I guess white or Asian student skin color. I don't understand why. I'm just trying to get a clear answer on that, because you're talking about different.
Can I try answering your question, Chief Trumpster? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I mean, just to go directly to it, I don't think there's a justification whether you take it from the perspective of the majority opinion or even, frankly, the dissents, because the dissents are still, at least Sotomayor's dissent, is applying strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny is a two-step test. One, whether a compelling government interest exists, and then if said compelling government interest exists, whether it's narrowly tailored or, as has been described in matters of race discrimination, essential to further it. So you have to prove further that the regulation is no more restrictive than is absolutely necessary to achieve the goal. So talking about compelling government interest, stopping discrimination is absolutely a compelling government interest. The Equal Protection Clause exists to stop discrimination by the government. No one is disputing that. Now, on to narrow tailoring, whether this is truly essential. Well, I don't think that it exists anymore. You have race neutral alternatives, biggest one being, as I point out in the pinned tweet, poverty that Michael Frazier tweeted about 6 hours ago, talking about economic status, background, communities, regions, inner cities, rural areas, addressing poverty. That is something that where once you go into economics, you're not subject to strict scrutiny. You're subject to rational basis under the law, which all you have to prove for rational basis is a legitimate government interest and whether that policy is rationally related to it. So that's the part one. The judicial philosophy that I'm actually on is I like Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion, which calls for going to Justice Harlan's lone dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson, which is that the Equal Protection Clause says what it means. No state shall deny any person equal protection under the law. Yes, we absolutely failed to apply that for 150 years, and we're still failing to apply that by saying we're doing strict scrutiny. The fact is, the first time strict scrutiny was ever applied was in Korematsu, which upheld the imprisonment of Japanese Americans in concentration camps in light of World War II. Strict scrutiny is an exception to the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, and I think colorblind constitution is truly the way to go. If a law makes a difference based on race, it's unlawful. That's my personal philosophy, though.
Yeah, so
And
so
this really
let me
gets
shift
into
just on. Yeah, go ahead, Michael. I'll let you respond, and then I want to shift right after that. So go ahead.
absolutely just quick point, and TJ is absolutely right in the assessment. And getting to Voltaire's point about the dynamics of the case in which the metrics is what is really at stake. And this is what I'm hearing in some of the arguments too, is that we're not qualifying the metrics in any sort of way that meets the purpose of which affirmative action was intended to a point. That was the point of the justice as well. How are we doing the metrics? And I think that this is a problem that we get into DEI education and also some of these safe zone trainings. Look, I'm queer to boot, but there's no substantive qualifications or studies that
Well,
shows that
Mike,
somebody
that's
taking a
the
safe
same
zone training
bias.
makes
The
less
same
legal
bias we're
decisions.
talking about here exists in artificial intelligence as well, which is why it's all a problem. Like the Supreme Court decision here that we're looking at is a pure example of what unaddressed, non-transparent bias looks like on decisions that impact everybody who pays money to keep this system flowing, running, and in a full effect, right? So this is where the problem lies. The people that are saying no have no reason to say no unless internally, which we don't all have time to go behind those doors and see what's going on, except for those that do. Where's your integrity? You're talking to a man that put his life on the line for you. You're not putting your life on the line for me. I gave you blood, even though we know history shows I've already given blood ancestrally, right? So you can't talk about me playing a victim. You can't talk about me not understanding because I still signed up for the military. I signed my name on that contract. I know what I was doing. So there's no victim role there, right? So this is where I say, can we all stop playing like we don't understand what's really going on? You feel me? Like, just let's be real. Let's just be real. And it's cool. Like, it's a conversation. You know what I'm saying? It's nobody gets harmed from a conversation.
Let me make the point that hasn't been made yet, and I've been on here for 2 hours trying to get it in. First off, you don't alleviate if you listen to many of the black men that have spoken in this space. It has been a consistent tone of resentment for past evil that has been done to their people, their ancestors. Well, you don't remedy that by creating the same paradigm but inverting it. And if you're going to be racist towards Asians and whites to alleviate evils of the past, we don't progress. We just create new resentment, but for a different, skin color. And for the life of me, I can't understand how people can advocate on behalf of race-based discrimination, which is what they're doing, but they won't just say it overtly. If you're going to advocate for that, I wish people would have the courage to explicitly state it. And no one's willing to do it. It's bizarre.
Yeah,
Well, I think it doesn't make sense if you think that, there's not like an immense amount of just like racial hatred that's encoded behind everything that's being said. Like once you come to understand that, it all makes sense.
Yeah, I've been trying to make this point like for a while. I've been trying to specifically get people to say that any of this race-based discrimination is bad. And I've had a lot of song and dances, a lot of long-winded talks, monologues, whatever you want to call it, but they have not answered the pure question about whether racial discrimination against Asians or whites is acceptable. If they feel like it's just and they want to be more inclusive.
No type
Bro,
of discrimination should be acceptable. Okay. Now I've been sitting here for a while listening to this, and host and co-host, I'm pretty ashamed of you because a little bit ago you let this guy come in this room and basically take it into a atmosphere that we did not need. He came in, he punched down on black people. Now you let this guy Liberty basically come in here,
Who are you
come in here
referring
and
to?
do the same thing. Now
Reverend,
it's supposed to be.
who?
Hold
just
on
drop
for a
static.
second. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me speak.
I'm
Let me
sorry, I
speak
did
real
not
quick.
punch down on black people at
Yeah.
all.
No.
He's
You
talking
have.
about chat.
No. Listen, if a black person is telling you that what he heard is you punching down on black people, just like this Cedric dude who I just blocked did, and the co-host and the host let them do this, it is wrong, my brother. It is wrong. Now,
But Reverend, we
the,
give everybody
the
we like
I
because
know
you're up on stage
I
here. We are
understand
giving
that.
you
I
the
understand
opportunity
that.
to refute the point,
The
right?
talk is
So
supposed to be about the Supreme Court banning the actions of today. It's not about gang members. It's not about all of this here type of stuff. And you're letting this room go to a place that it should not go. Is what I'm telling you. We're talking about how is this affecting people, not just black people. How is it affecting white people? How is it affecting Asian people? And then you let some
okay. So
chowderhead
let me
come in
ask you
here
that,
and
Reverend.
say the things
I want to shift to that topic
that
just
he
a
was
little
saying.
bit.
You guys should have stopped him from the get jump,
Okay.
from the
Well,
get jump,
I'm
and
not
then
even
you should have
exactly
kicked him
sure what
out.
you're.
Is
I'm
what
not
you
even
should have done.
exactly sure what you're
So
talking
one
about.
second,
What I
Rev,
will
Rev,
ask you here
Nick,
is because
Nick,
you
let me just
just
jump in
Claire?
1
mentioned.
second. Rev,
Yeah.
the issue is like you need to specify what is the point that you have a contention with, and the second point is then you need to counter it. There's been a number of comments made here on both sides that both sides find offensive. The whole point of this is that you're meant to counter it and just dispel any kind of information that you believe is problematic to educate people, and both sides attempt to do that. So we won't kick people out just because they said something you disagree with, but what you can do is you can quite easily counter it, and it's easy to do so. So go ahead and counter the point, and that's all we want.
Well, I've been trying to get back and forth. My phone is acting up today for some reason, but again, when people come in here and start punching down on the black community, talking about
Put a name on
gangs.
it, Rev.
Hold on, let me finish. And things of that sort. Just like this dude Liberty just started talking about telling us how we should feel, right? I don't come in these rooms and tell white people how they should feel.
When did I do that? When did I
That's
do that?
what I'm talking. When you from the get jump, when you sitting here going, we coming in here as if we're mad, if we're upset. We're not
Yeah, you
mad.
do.
We're not
You
upset.
sound
We're
upset and you
passionate.
sound resentful.
We're
Okay,
passionate. We're
exactly.
passionate about a situation that
Reverend, your
has
phone's breaking up.
happened to us over and over and over
Your
and
phone's in the blender.
over and over again,
Yeah,
whether it's from
Reverend,
the
we're
Republicans
losing
or
you a
the
bit, man. But
Democrats.
I'm going to go to. I know
We're
Adam
Reverend,
was
passionate
first.
your
about it.
mic's not
And you take a
working.
passion, everybody, I'm not angry. What I'm trying to do is fix the problem that we're having all the time.
I mean,
I mean, it's just a confusion in
1
terminology.
second.
I think
1
that's going
second.
to be expected at a table like this, right? There's a lot of diversity, a lot of language barriers, a lot of people trying to understand where some people are coming from. So nobody is perfect in linguistics here. And I think we got to be a little more genuine and understand how much more thick skin we need at this table to make this conversation happen, right? So
Listen, the entire point I was trying to make was
hold
that
on, Liberty,
if
Liberty,
that
Liberty. Hold on,
the resentment that comes from
Liberty.
past discrimination.
Liberty, I'm gonna let you go, fam. Just relax. I didn't even take what you said offensively. You see who decided to take you offensively. People pick and choose what they find offensive. I've been sitting here the whole time with y'all with no issue with what none of you say. Why? Because I've saved lives like this before. It doesn't bother me for the conversation. I'd rather sit back, absorb other walks of life understanding. If you make a mistake in a conversation, expect it to come from me too. I'm gonna make mistakes. So if I'm willing to say, all right, my bad, made a mistake, you can say the same thing. We can just get past it and keep the conversation flowing. Don't analyze for the next man. You don't want no man putting words in your mouth. So let's keep the same respectability. Don't put words in my mouth. Fire with fire. We're on the same team here because we're all trying to address a bigger
Okay,
picture.
let me just reiterate what the point I was trying to make. The resentment that has come from past injustice, if you try to alleviate it with current injustice, you're going to create resentment amongst white and Asian people in this country. I think it's counterproductive at its core. It's circular reasoning that we have to be racist to alleviate past racism. We don't actually get past racism by perpetuating it in a new iteration. That's the only point I was trying to make.
No, I understand that, but this is a thing, right? You speak for one specific understanding.
I can hear him if he's talking.
Yeah. I think we lost.
I accidentally hit
Real quick though, I mean, Libby is passionate. You
you.
can't.
Wait, Chief, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chief?
Yeah, but I'm trying to finish my point real quick.
Right, guys. I think that what it is there is some Twitter glitches today, so that's the reason people are getting muted and unmuted. I've heard this. I've received a number of messages that this is happening. So just for your information, nobody's getting muted. There are Twitter glitches, and that's what's happening. Denise, thank you for joining the panel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this before we go to somebody else. Go ahead, Denise.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate having the space and thank you for the invitation to talk. So much has been said. So I'm just going to share some of my original thoughts based on the invitation. I think this ruling is less catastrophic than people are framing it as a ban. It is a ban on race-based. Your original title was appropriate, and by my estimate, on race-based decisions, which are decisions that are rooted in the race only of the person. When I read through the decision, the concurring opinions, and the dissenting opinions, I see throughout it the repeated mention of the history that necessitated affirmative actions in the first place. I heard many of the brothers who came to the stage talk about that history and also mention the ways in which that history has the deprivations, the extractions, the economic extractions, the educational and other deprivations that President Kennedy was trying to correct, and Johnson added a whole bunch of people to in his version of the EO. that hasn't been repaired because everybody's been added to it. So people have talked about the idea that Negroes, the freedmen, the people who fought for affirmative actions to implement our constitutional rights that we've been deprived of from 1865 to the 1960s civil rights era, had not been fully implemented. And thus we were still deprived. And those deprivations add up. And I think we're having conversations about race, and people aren't acknowledging the realities that the 14th Amendment and the post-Civil War constitutional amendments were specifically designed to repair freedmen, those people who had been so deprived, who had been chattel slaves, building wealth of the nation and not being able to benefit from it. And it's not about what I think, it's about what they argued about. And I think what's going to be interesting, because this isn't the last lawsuit on this by far, what's going to be really interesting is how when universities and others start to actually implement programs for freedmen, which is operationally defined by the radical Republicans, when they start to implement those programs, as this edict says, people can be considered for discrimination. Even in our oral arguments for this case, they probed the idea that freedmen, the descendants of U.S. slaves, are protected by class. One of the justices, and I can't even remember if it's Kavanaugh or who, acknowledged that reality, that it is a class-based protection because of the history of discrimination in this nation. It's going to be interesting to see how people respond to that. Because what we can't have is this. We can't have people saying, yes, we understand the discrimination. Yes, we know to some extent it's still happening. Yes, we know that there are even economic estimates that came out in 2020 about the cost of just the last 20 years, but we need to move on now. I think that's grossly unfair. And so while we shouldn't be discriminating against white people, it's not a discrimination against white people. It's a repair of the people who had been historically harmed, and we have to acknowledge
Denise,
that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I want to go. I'm going to go here real quick. I'm going to go to an audience question, and again, reminder: bottom right hand corner, guys. You can leave your questions, and I sit here, and my job is to literally sit here and read them. So definitely put them bottom right hand corner. I want to ask you, Denise, the main demographic that is affected by affirmative action in a negative way when it comes to college admissions are Asians. We're not talking about white people. We're talking about Asians that are, being shut out. They apply to a college such as Harvard or UNC. Those are the two that were directly involved in the case that came today in the Supreme Court. Why is that not racism? I mean, we are shutting out a minority in the United States, just based on race and nothing else. Is that not unfair? Is that not racism? Denise?
My mic is glitching. Twitter. A couple of things about that. One, we have to look at the arguments for those particular cases against those institutions and their practices specifically and particularly. And if I recall correctly, there were some nuances there. There were other elements that I recall from the evidence that was based on things like leadership, personality, gregariousness, yada, yada, yada. Those things are institutional issues. Nothing that and when you talk about discrimination, we're not talking about the number of women who get gender-based preferences. We're not talking about legacy admissions, which take up the vast majority of such things, which discriminates, if you want to say that, against everybody, including the freedmen, who there are 50 some odd million of us, if you want to do the upward estimate of that. So let's not conflate the individual practices of those institutions with the larger obligation that the nation and its institutions who had slaves and used them as collateral, the obligations they have to those freed people. And I know while it's the best way to gain momentum in America is to make the Negro your enemy, which is actually what has happened here. Now, they talked about legacy admissions. I'll have to look at
How did you get to that
decision to
conclusion,
see if they
Denise?
address that.
This is a very important point. How did you get to that conclusion that the best
He
way?
just hates white people. He just hates white people. That's how.
The fun,
Yeah, Chill out, man. Relax, relax,
I'm
relax.
sorry, Nick. What
Not
was your
doing
question? It'd be really helpful.
Yeah,
Can I just?
I'm sorry, Denise. There was like four people talking at the same time, so I didn't meet the entire room. But now, how did you get to that conclusion that the best way to succeed in America is by putting down black people? That's a
What I
pretty
said. So
important
let's make
charge.
sure you understood. Let's make sure you understood what I'm saying. The best way to succeed with this kind of case about affirmative action or ending any kind of preferential treatment or ending or uprooting the protected class statuses that the people who were here at the time decided were important because they understood the cost that those groups have borne. The best way to attack them is to attack the Negro special class statuses in particular. That is what I am saying.
So Chadical, let me bring you in on this. I'm curious. Do you agree with that? Is that the best way to
It kind of cut
go
out.
about this?
It
Is
kind
to
of cut
attack
out.
the?
Can you reiterate? It kind of cut out for me.
Yeah. So Denise, reiterate your point in like a few seconds here, just so Chadical. I know he heard most of it, but reiterate your point real quick.
People are trying to attempt to deride the protected class statuses for the people who were founding populations of this nation. Negroes, freedmen, descendants of slaves being one, Native Americans being other. The best way to gain momentum in your attack against those things and framing them somehow as racist because they get in the way of your newfound ambitions is to go after the things that Black Americans, Negroes, their protected status, because Negroes are an easy target that people can and tend to pile onto. Notice they didn't go after legacies, which are mostly white people.
Chadical?
The point, can I say real quick? Like 10 seconds or 30 seconds, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you notice what Denise did. So after all that talking, at the very end of that, she said that that the racism against the white and Asian students is okay because it's preparing for.
I absolutely did not say it was okay. Lineage-based quotas are fine with me. I don't think Negroes should at any point. I don't think Negroes at any point should be lumped in. So I'm talking about freedmen. Freedmen should be a special set aside altogether that should not be in competition with any other people, particularly at institutions like Harvard, which use slaves
real
as
quick.
collateral. Period.
Yeah, Denise, can you briefly summarize freedmen for the audience? Denise.
It takes a while for the mic to cooperate. Freedmen is the class of people that the framers of the post-Civil War Constitution, those folks who codified the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, conferred that freedmen protected class on the Negroes and their children, their descendants, who were freed and emancipated from slavery. So there were three groups there. It was the actual people who were enslaved at the time throughout the nation. It was the free Negroes of various types of ethnicities, right? So you think about the Aboriginal Negroes, the mulatto Negroes who were part Native and all those types of things. And then, it was those three. So those folks were freed from the threat of slavery per the 13th Amendment. And with the 14th Amendment, they implemented programs to repair the extractions, the economic extractions, the educational extractions that those formerly enslaved people and their descendants had endured. Those are the freed men. And they also said that those freed men were the Negroes who were emancipated, those three groups that I mentioned.
So the point was I made a point that Denise did not. I got interrupted first of all, and then she listened to my entire point. The issue was, you look at, again, we have a recording of this. We'll all look back at this and watch this whole thing. But you, again, at the very end of your statement, you said that you're okay with it, and this is
no, I did not.
You just say you're for. Are you for affirmative action or against it? You said you're
I am for a Negro affirmative action as originally intended. Now, if you think affirmative action is racist, then that's your own cognitive deficit. That is not mine.
We have a recording of this. I watched a replay of it too, and I'm watching it back on my own spot, my own side of this. But no, it's funny because you said Negro affirmative action. That's your direct words just there to make sure you're keeping track. So
Yeah,
you
but
want
see, like you got to understand too. Like what we like to do is bounce around and find the weak points in conversations. Where I've had a discussion with you, and we actually got to the bottom of that as men, right? So what I wouldn't allow is you to find the weak point in the conversation and kind of conflate the argument. Well, we're basically, just allowing people the freedom to speak, right? I thought we are all allowed the God-given right. Just allow her to have her peace, and I mean, don't like really retaliate. If you really got to go play it back and prove what she's saying, you're gonna have to wait to do that. That's just what happens in conversations, man. Thick skin. Is it in you? Like Gatorade. You know what I'm saying? Like shit. Sometimes you just gonna have to miss a couple of points and go play the playback. If you really rock with her, you'll follow her. Y'all will get each other a follow. You'll have a conversation like adults could. Like, can we do that?
up to me. If I could finish your point, it'd be great because we're having a conversation. It's two-way dialogue. So if you could be muted, while I finish your point, it'd be great. The point I was trying to make for Denise specifically, not you, was that you said that you're for a one race affirmative action, which is exclusionary to a variety of other races. So if you were for, I guess, prioritizing one race and excluding another race, do you think that is racist?
Affirmative actions were designed to repair the people who were enslaved in this nation. And it is unfortunate but true that that was a particular group of people. It does not apply to Black immigrants. It does not
But
apply
Denise,
to
you're
Black.
saying
Anyway,
repair
so
the people that were enslaved in the United
Come
States,
on,
but
it's
but
not just
we're talking
reparation.
generations ago.
It's also their stuff that we're talking about, the implementation of affirmative actions. It's not generations ago. We're talking about people who are still alive today, and slavery and Jim Crow are a continuation of an unbroken chain of harm to a specific line of people. And those people happen to be the people who were enslaved in the nation, and the people who were there at
Let's
their
also talk
emancipation
about
decided that they needed special considerations, and it would be really against the 14th Amendment to suggest that those people throughout their documents who talk about Negroes and the Black freedmen and the like were colorblind when clearly they were not. They were looking at that class of people, and they weren't talking about all Black people. They were talking about those people who had been subject to slavery and were freed by the integrity of the nation and its leaders at that time.
But
So
Denise, you get the history right, but you get the modern applications so wrong. The history,
Well,
as you
thank you
pointed
for
out,
that. I'll
applied to.
trust you on that.
I'm going to explain. I'm just giving my conclusion in advance. Now, you mentioned three categories of individuals that constituted freedmen: slaves, freed blacks, and their children. All categories of those three
I
individuals.
said also the people who were enslaved by Native Americans, but of course the descendants of the same.
Your exact words were their children, which is what the Freedmen's Bureau applied to. It was their children. It was not their descendants all the way down ad infinitum. That is not the
Their
case.
children
And
are descendants, and it
Denise,
does
can I
indeed
please
say
finish?
that.
I did not interrupt you at any point except for the time when your mic cut out. Please let me finish. Under the plain text of the 14th Amendment, it says no person shall be deprived of the equal protection under the law. Yes, Freedmen's Bureau, for the categories of individuals you mentioned, that was absolutely justified to make sure that freedmen were off to the right start. There is no former slave or their children who are alive.
Can't be an
He's
absolute.
dead.
Child of a slave.
He's
But you
dead.
can't be an absolutist. Like you can't be an absolutist unless you're able to state those facts
I,
and put the resources. You know how that
no,
works. So we can't be these statistic majors if we're not going to actually show people where those facts
well,
actually.
well, Admiral, let me
sure.
finish
I'm saying there is no living person who was ever a slave, unless we're counting human trafficking, of course. But I don't. But let's go to those plain text. It's no person. It doesn't say no freedmen. It's no person. So now
And when
we
you look at
talk
their
about the.
arguments, they
Denise, can I please
originally
finish? I
said
never
people who are
interrupted you even
African
once. I
Yeah,
never
descent,
Denise,
interrupted.
and they
Denise,
changed
I
it.
gotta let,
Good
I gotta
God.
let, we did let you speak, TJ. Finish your point, and then I'm gonna go to. I'll let Denise respond, and then I'm gonna go to Chatical. So go ahead.
It really is as simple as far back as the 1890s, the first time the Supreme Court took on a race discrimination case in Plessy versus Ferguson, the lone dissenter who said discrimination is wrong said that the Constitution is a colorblind one. It is meant to apply to all individuals now under the Equal Protection Clause. We have failed to apply that. It's about time we start doing so. Says person, it is for everyone. And I mean, just looking at the pure facts of it, Harvard's consideration of race has led to an 11.1% decrease in the
Okay,
number of
so
Asian Americans admitted to Harvard. I
genealogy,
mean, there was discrimination against another race.
But TJ, do you believe in genetics, genealogy, lineage, heritage, any of that? Does any of that apply to you?
Not under the law.
I mean,
Not under the law.
does it apply to you? That means it does apply to you in some way, just not lawfully. So that means it's an application, right?
Sure, of course,
Okay, and so
cultural
then if
matters,
we're
but the
talking,
fact
okay,
is,
okay,
we are.
so work with me, TJ. I don't want to cook you too bad. I just want to know if you're talking equality, right? And then you're talking about lineage and heritage, and that's applicable to you. Then in humanity's sense, why can't it be applicable to everybody else? And their lineage and heritage have a different tradition than yours. What is the
So I'm,
problem?
I'm not I'm not saying that it can't. What I am saying though is
I mean,
that
for the
the
fact that you're
Constitution, which I took an oath to,
hold on,
I took
TJ.
an
You
oath.
said it's non-existent. Remember, it's recorded, so you said it's non-existent. So, what is the
I
problem
said
with having heritage or lineage that actually can relate to history? Aren't you the person doing the same thing as a human being? Do you not do the same thing when you look back in your history book, in your book, at your great grandparents and your parents' accomplishment and stuff? Do you not do that?
well, my family history books were kind of burned down in a fire, so I don't really do that anymore. But
Look,
the
like, hold on, TJ. If they were burned in a fire, do you not have a brain? Do you not use a brain with
dude,
memories?
I was joking with you there. They actually were
Okay, then,
burned down, but I'm just
we're
being
trying to, okay, like,
sarcastic.
so
But let's
but let's be serious as men. Like, do you not go back from time to time as a man and think about the past that got you here today?
Sure, the past matters, but once again,
Okay,
though,
so then if it matters
look,
to you,
man, look.
all I'm
Here's the
saying,
problem. Can I please address your
all right, we're
point of
having a
why I
dialogue. We're
dispute?
having a dialogue. Don't
Look,
be
I
sensitive.
dispute the
Sounds
relevance of what
relevant.
you're saying because at the end of the day, yes, that can matter to you as a human being. Where it cannot matter is in application to the
Hold on,
14th
TJ. There
Amendment,
you
which is a
go,
clause of a
dictating how
constitution to which
TJ.
I took an
Nobody on the
oath.
walk. Come on, TJ. Like nobody on the planet Earth walks around telling the next person in a state of equality what should and shouldn't matter to them. This is why we have this whole equality situation going on for the, LGBTQ community, right? So you got to be honest, man. You got to stop dictating things you don't have the ability to dictate. You believe in religion, right? So if you believe in God-given rights, where's everybody's applicable God-given rights and what you're talking about right now, man? Like I'm just saying, man, I'm not saying you're not having the ability to have the freedom of speech, but I'm saying if you're going to have a free speech, are you going to be genuine with it? Like if I
I mean,
can respect, you can look at family lineage, right? Why
I'm
can't
being
you?
I'm being entirely genuine. What I am saying though is that this conversation about lineage, about heritage, it has no place under the Equal
But
Protection
there you
Clause.
go,
I'm
TJ.
not
What
here to talk. You're
I'm
politicizing a fundamentally legal
you're
issue.
TJ,
You
this
are talking about a
conversation,
legal issue. That's the
TJ,
your
come
polit.
on, bro.
But
Like
that's the
TJ,
entire
this
dude. This is the
conversation.
entire problem. This is the entire problem here. We're trying to turn a
Let's be
legal
honest.
issue into a
Let's go with the
political
title
one.
of the
This isn't
conversation. Let's
politics.
start with the title of the conversation, right? The title of this conversation is about the Supreme Court. That alone has history. Affirmative action alone has history. The debates alone have history, TJ. So what we're doing here is being unrealistic
This
when
all
you
just
sit.
seems like grandstanding at this
I
point.
mean, I understand. I can point out more things that we should all be able to point out to. But remember, I'm the dumb black guy. I shouldn't know any of these things. But it's okay. I'm helping people walk in the path of
No
understanding.
one's ever said that.
No, I mean,
You should not
hey, look, I'm cracking jokes. See, you thought you was the only one that had humor, man. That's what I'm saying. Like, get a little sensitivity about your system, dog. But I'm telling you, bro, if there's history in everything, even in the terminology we use, no human being can dictate what part of history belongs to each other. And that's called respect and
Look,
genuity. Like, what
look,
part of
no,
that
I'm
people
not trying to I'm not trying to
I'm your
disrespect
admiral.
anyone
You
here. What
know
I'm
the land.
trying to say though is that the 14th Amendment says no person, not no freedman.
But the
That's the entire
14th
Can I
point.
address
Amendment.
that now?
The 14th Amendment applies to everyone.
the thing though, it's like TJ's making points specifically
Can
legal.
I address that now?
And
Because I'm
by the way,
pretty
TJ,
sure I was next to respond to
it's,
TJ's comment. So I would like to have the mic to
yeah,
speak
it,
freely and without interruption. I would appreciate
you,
that.
Sure, Denise. Yeah. 60 seconds, please.
Yeah, sure. So when you look at the arguments and the congressional minutes of the deliberations about that, they were talking about if it should say Africans born in the United States, right? That particular language. So people need to read those things that they were discussing. And when they talk about people in person, they were making sure they were clear that the freedmen were no longer considered 3/5 human, counted as property and chattel. They were people in persons. If you doubt that, look at the fact that United States sued Wong Kim Ark to get him up out of here, saying that he wasn't a citizen. That was potentially wrongly conferred because his parents had relinquished their citizenship or their permanent legal domicile to the United States. Not only that, Native Americans didn't fall under the 14th Amendment, even though they were born inside the United States. They had to have their own separate law to make them citizens in 1924.
So,
Chaticle, let me bring you in here real quick. I want you to. I know you've been trying to jump in here for a while, so I want to let you jump in. But then I'm gonna have a follow up question for you as well. So Chaticle, jump in. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. I mean, I've like looked into this topic pretty extensively lately. One of the things that I was like really surprised to find out was that the overall literacy rates of Black Americans were much higher under Jim Crow than they are today. And so I wonder, it's like if they had maintained their same literacy rates, would we be dealing with the same economic inequality that we're seeing? And would Denise even be advocating for race-based discrimination only for Black people who were descendants of slaves? And do you think that Denise would have been literate enough to figure out that freedmen only applied to the children, not the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the great-great-great-grandchildren?
Well, if you read the deliberations, it does indeed talk about their families and obviously birthright citizenship, which they also conferred in the 14th, tells you that their rights conferred again to their children. Why would the framers frame something like that, which wasn't going to confer downward for the rest of time? They were interested in repair, and it's very obvious that you and many others are interested in perennial, ongoing culture wars when we have much more important things to deal with.
I went to YouTube college. I taught myself to code online
I don't
for
care.
free,
And so have I.
I make over $100,000 a year. I don't
And
give a
so
fuck
do
about
I.
any of this stuff, quite
Congratulations.
frankly.
It means nothing.
Oh,
You
yeah.
should be smarter then.
No, I am smarter. I've also got like individual business ventures and stuff, but it's to drive home the point. It's like I don't really care about this stuff because I'm successful. I think it's like all the drug dealers and like the whores
That's beside the
money that
point. Can we move the
want this
conversation,
shit.
please? We're talking about affirmative action. So all of that is just beside the point, right? And we're
But
just talking.
Deshaun, is it beside the point though?
Listen,
Because
he's
affirmative
talking
action
about.
seems to be that, and the arguments that have been here today are that Black people don't have the opportunities because they are oppressed. You have Chaticle coming in here who is, based on what he said, is successful, has been able to make it in America. So,
Yeah, right.
is
Me too.
affirmative action
Great.
necessary? So
Right. Yeah, great.
that is the question here. It is related, but go ahead.
Well, I think it is necessary because I hate white people and I only want Black people to get given opportunities.
The thing is, we've been in this space for like how many hours? I'm not even sure. And I've been asking this question specifically just about if you think that it's racist against Asian and white people. And I've gotten a variety of responses, and I've not really gotten a coherent response to anybody who
it's Admiral speaking. Which one of those responses did
if I
you
can
actually
you see Admiral
That's the
respond to the point. He sees
Admiral, you know how the rank works in the military, admirals over chiefs. So I'm asking you real quick, what answer did you actually gravitate to? Because you keep saying you got a variety of responses, but as men who understand how communication works, what did you pick to actually to take as an answer? When you keep saying you heard a variety of responses, where did you hear an actual response you can alleviate or elaborate on,
Yeah, I found our occasional point be great. It's all respect being able to listen to someone and be quiet, and then listen to another person and be quiet. I've been very quiet listening to everybody here. I haven't interrupted or anything, but Admiral and other people have been interrupting a lot. So if I can eventually point out being interrupted, that'd be great. It's called conversation, two-way street. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to
for the
get.
times you have interrupted, don't get sensitive.
Yeah, well, Admiral, I've been very respectful to you. I'm not sure the same about me. But anyway, the point I was trying to make again before I was interrupted was that I haven't got a clear response about the calling out of, in this sense, what I'm seeing as selective racism against Asian students and white students. This is a problem. Shouldn't even be a debate. There shouldn't be any discrimination based on race. I don't want legacy student stuff. I want that gone too. As a middle class American who apply to colleges, I wouldn't want to be beat out because of my race or because someone has a higher status than I do in society. So it's not. It's like this whataboutism I've been hearing about the legacy stuff.
Well,
We're talking.
Chief, quick question, right? So, first of all, like Chief, can you hear me? Yeah. In terms of like, I made my point earlier about what it shouldn't be based on race and it should be based on economic factors. So therefore, and so whoever's economically disadvantaged, it should be based on that. There should be some kind of system in place. Like it shouldn't be just affluent people getting a better opportunity because they got better education, because that's not about intelligence. So that also applies to Asians, because Asians, generally speaking, are more from affluent backgrounds, are from more affluent areas, and so that would impact them. So what do you think about this situation? Let's say it's just me and you. I've gone to a posh school. I've got the best teachers. I've received the best education. And so obviously I'm gonna get better grades. You might be smarter than me, but you didn't get the better teachers. You didn't get the better. You didn't get the better schools. You didn't get the better grades. For that reason, you didn't get the better grades. Should I have a better right just based on the fact that who my parents are to get into university or college? So that's why I'm saying that. So what do you think about that, Chief?
Couple points about this. I think our country is we spend the most money per student of any country. We spend so much money on one student, and there in some states actually spend well, each state depends. Some states spend a lot more on one student than other people with very different results. Until we can get that part figured out, or why we're spending so much money in education, we're not getting a return on our investment. Then we can go and figure out the
No,
entire.
that's fine. That's fine. That's a separate point. But this specific
It's
point, because the
because
issue
they're
is,
beating the shit out of each other in school.
if you don't have a system that takes that into consideration and have a very binary system, you're essentially going to have a large proportion of people, a large proportion of certain races as well, a large proportion of poor people. Essentially, it's not about race; it's about poor people. You'll have a large proportion of poor people who won't get into universities and won't get into colleges. Chief.
Yes. So to answer that, so my response is, we should have a system in place that excludes based on, based off of race. So I'm again. So to
No, so I'm not saying race. I'm saying
yeah, yes,
financial. Yeah, because
yeah,
once you go, and the reason I'm saying that is once you go into the aspect of financial capability and poverty, then generally speaking, more black people, it will benefit more black people because they're below the black people. The fact that black people achieve less is because of a major factor is economic aspects. And when you talk about
They
Asian
actually
people, Chief, they achieve better because of them being from more affluent backgrounds. Chief.
they actually tried controlling for this with college admissions a while back, and what they found is that when controlling for historic poverty, it benefited more white people than black
I'm not
people. So
saying
they
yeah, that's
changed it
fine.
to race.
I'm not saying historic poverty. I'm talking about current financial
No,
situation.
there's only 44 million black people in America, and there's like what something like 60 million white people that are in
No,
poverty.
but proportionally, so more percentage of black people are in
Yeah, but I'm just
underpopulation.
saying in raw numbers.
Yeah, Chief.
So the answer again. So I see this. I see this in terms of the situation at hand. I'd say point one. We should not. The solution should not be to discriminate based off of race. Point two would be, I guess, in that sense, it would be more of a how I phrase it. If we put so much money into education, and if we're gonna even try to we spend as of right now currently millions and millions of dollars on sorry, billions actually, and we're not really getting a return on investment. So if we were to really address that, it would be on like I guess, education basis of reforming that. I think there is a lot of misspending for education across the country. However, I think that that question is a whole separate topic in terms of how do you refix education, or whatever, or how to integrate technology into there, or how to teach, because we are behind for a variety of other countries. We're ranked, like, I'm not sure what ranking we are in education based off of the world, but we can do better than that in general. However,
okay, let me ask Admiral some question. Admiral, what do you think? Admiral?
My bad, my mic is glitching, man. But again, like I said again, we're still dancing to me. Like I don't think Chief is just actually trying to accept the fact nobody made the statement that we're excluding anybody. We've multiple times said we the people in this space. So if we the people is all inclusive, there's no way that anybody's trying to isolate.
Hey, brother, let me explain the confusion here. There's a limited amount of admissions to college every year, right? So if you're going to give any sort of favoritism towards any sort of group based off of ethnicity, that has to be to the exclusion of another. So while the framing appears to be that no, this is just about benefiting, descendants of slaves, well, it has to be to the detriment of others. And based off of the statistics I've seen, it is largely Asians and then secondarily white people that are being discriminated against to the benefit of other minorities. So it's just on its face, it appears, and in practice, it is discriminatory and in fact racist. And I just don't see how you get around that fact.
We'll see
Okay, I
again.
have a question because we keep, like he said, we keep dancing, and I have a question, and I want somebody to answer it. How can we keep having this conversation when we're talking about affirmative action and race, but we're not talking about legacy, and we're not talking about
So
those who pay their way in? Like, is that equal? Is that on the same playing field? I really need to understand this because we talk about race, but it seems like everybody is going straight to race, but we're not discussing legacy and all the other admission tactics that are used.
But
I'm
that's
To
really
be
Deshaun,
honest,
confused.
I'd
that's not
actually love to
applicable to what
discuss
the ruling
legacy,
today was.
if possible.
wait, TJ, hold on. So if
So the thing that's majorly being ignored here is this
sure.
transparency. And we keep talking about moving into a world with evolved transparency, where right now we're not even understanding that there was no transparency, as you mentioned, Liberty, right? If these people are actually racist and against the communities like this, why don't they just say it so people could stop voting for them, right? Let's have that type of integrity, because they're requiring that to be some of the basic job requirements for just some type of stepping stone in life. But the people actually in charge of millions can't seem to have this integrity point where they can just say, oh, well, I'm just plain out biased against certain people and communities, so this is why it didn't happen. We wouldn't have to have this conversation if those overturning it would also not make us wait 300,000 years to find out what was the real point behind it. That's what transparency
So,
is about.
Admiral, question. Let me finish that point, and I let so I can't remain. Deshaun finished his point, and my answer a couple 5 minutes ago, I specifically said I don't want there to be legacy stuff with admissions. I literally said this, and I said,
So we should be having an overall conversation, because what's happening is now we're tilting this conversation more, to the Black student population.
So Desha,
And that's where this conversation is going. If we're going to really talk about affirmative action, we need to let everything out on the table and talk about that. And as Denise mentioned earlier, with the decision, they didn't even take race all the way out, from my understanding. And Denise, please correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say that earlier?
Correct.
Desha,
Yeah,
Thank
they
you.
did not.
So it's not even all the way out. So what are we, my question now is, what are we talking about right now? What are we
So
really
Deshaun,
talking about when we peel this back?
Deshaun, I'm highly sympathetic to getting rid of legacy.
Wait, Desha. Sorry, can I just finish the point? Because Desha was talking
Yeah.
to me, and I was trying to finish the point before I got interrupted again by people. The point what I was trying to explain was that I mentioned legacy stuff. We mentioned this several times in this space. In the very beginning, I was talking about legacy issues as well. What people are doing is a whataboutism, saying, what about this? What about talking about this? We're talking about one specific issue right now, about the affirmative action. He wants about legacy issues. Okay, I've already talked about that. I already said that's an issue too. I've already talked about that. As a white middle class person who applied for colleges, I had to go against affirmative action and those legacy people. So I've already spoken up and said many times, if you were paying attention to on this space, about the admissions process from a person who applied to schools recently and talked about how the affirmative action was bad because it's discrimination based off race and legacy stuff. So to answer the question, no one's not talking about it, but we're trying to stay on this specific topic. If you want to respond to that, you can. I'll let you finish. Respond to that, and we can have a discussion, not talking over people, interrupting them.
But this isn't something new,
It's
right?
because
I mean, conservatives have always been against affirmative action. This isn't like where they've changed their stance in the last 5-10 years, right? 30-40 years ago, I was hearing conservatives complain about affirmative action, and that's correct, right? I mean, for the conservatives that are in here, conservatives have always been against affirmative action. I don't want to speak for them. You can confirm that. Is that right? That you've never been for affirmative action?
Correct.
I'm a conservative. I'm for
Okay.
it. I'm also a Republican, like a real one.
Okay. Well, the original affirmative action was from Executive Order 10925, President John F. Kennedy in 1961, that included a provision that government contractors, quote, take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. So the conservatives in here have already said that they're against that from the very beginning. LBJ, a Democrat in 1965, issued another executive order in 11248 in 1965, prohibiting employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, and national origin by those organizations receiving federal contracts and subcontracts. And in 1967, he amended the order to include sex on the list of the attributes. So from the beginning, affirmative action was ensuring that applicants and employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. And so the conservatives have already said that they're
I just
against
want to
that.
point out how unbelievably dishonest this guy is, because he's trying to make the claim that modern affirmative action, which openly gives preference to individuals of specific races, is the same thing as old 1960s. That is exactly what you just did. It is dishonest. You are an intellectually dishonest hack.
That is bullshit.
Yes, you are.
The
You are.
entire
You are intellectually
dishonesty,
dishonest.
Lord, is based
You're a
around that.
liar.
He's still
You
reading
are
from a three-year book that
smearing
supports
personality. It is despicable. No.
Stop.
Yeah, I was alive in 1998. You're a liar. You're dishonest. You're a liar. You're a hack. That was not struck down in this decision. Affirmative action, as defined by SCOTUS in this case, was. Yes.
I didn't
So
ask
that's part one.
if
Now,
this current
you
definition is
are
what you were
such a
against.
liar.
I
If you
asked
ask
if they've
someone,
always been
okay,
against affirmative action, and they confirmed yes,
okay,
always
well,
been
are
against
you for
affirmative
free
action.
speech? And if you're for free speech, does that only apply to quill pens? Because when it was put down, it was only a quill pen. You're a liar. You're dishonest. You're a hack.
Okay, guys.
Action was.
Dude, dude, just quit being a fucking liar.
And you
I
can't
mean, come
argue
on.
with that. That's your problem.
No, it's because you're a fucking liar. Because no one understands.
Guys, you both are just being really rude. Let me go to Michael. Michael, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
I think that the point moved on from.
I think I'm muted, Khaleesi.
Yeah, no, it was muted by the host. Thanks. Listen, really interesting discussion. Now, I'm British. I've got no stake in the game here. But what I will say is that there's been a lot of talk about the fact that the banning of this affirmative action is a racist action against the Black community, the African American, specifically the African American community, and therefore it's racism and there should be equality and things like that. I'm not denying that there are aspects of racism in American society, as there are in generally in Western countries, including in the UK. We have institutional racism, and this has been proven through various different kind of government investigations and reports. But here's the thing, if you truly want equality, then you have to fight for that equality. When you've got congresswomen, and I'm just going to take it a little bit out because people have taken it out here, you know, you've gone into history and things like that. So when you've got congresswomen like Rashida Tlaib saying, I think she was in Detroit, this is the beautiful, the most beautiful and blackest and beautiful, you know, state or city ever. I didn't see the African American community raise an eyebrow or a finger to say, hang on a minute, that's quite racist, because there are a lot of different nationalities that live in Detroit. So when you say the most beautiful and blackest, you're excluding all of those. When I heard Biden say, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, he's just excluding every other race and nationality. I didn't hear the African American community stand up at that time and say, hang on, we want equality. We don't want preferential treatment. So
That's
that's
not true. We didn't even like
wait,
that
wait, let me
statement.
finish.
That's
I
not
didn't
true.
interrupt anybody.
We
I
didn't even like that
waited.
statement.
Excuse me, I waited. I
One,
literally have waited 20 minutes to speak. So
let's be
please
honest.
let
I
me
waited.
finish.
20 minutes
Do
is
not
actually
interrupt me. I didn't
have
interrupt
no
anybody.
understanding what's
Do
going on.
not
Okay,
interrupt
relax.
me.
It's all
Let
good.
me
Go
finish
ahead.
my point and then you can address me, okay? Because
Take
it's
your time
just
out,
rude
man.
to
What you
jump
doing?
in.
Like,
So
figure it out.
you can address me once I finish. I'm not going to listen to you until I've finished.
I
So
get
have
ready.
that decorum, okay?
All right, don't
So
worry
my
about
second
it.
point is, no, wait, shush. My second point is that when you go into historical injustices, I accept that they have happened, but they have happened across different communities. And yes, the African American community historically has suffered, but we're in 2023 right now, okay? This banning of affirmative action is taken in 2023, June the 30th specifically, or 29th, 2023. So when you try to go into what happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or whatever, you're actually just causing more division. You're not addressing and uniting to deal with the issues of today. And this, I find, is very divisive. And actually, a lot of, I have a lot of American friends who come on my spaces from all walks of life, from all backgrounds. Generally speaking, they agree that they want unity, but this rhetoric of going into history and talking about, what happened centuries ago or decades ago is very divisive. And that's all I want to say. Bear in mind, I don't have a stake in the game, but I'm telling you, this is
Then
how
you
it
shouldn't have
looks.
Well,
spoken
no,
about it because
Why
isn't
it's
that
too
not? Why
important for
not?
you
What
to not
happens
have
in
a stake
America
in
how
it.
are we
affects the
going to
rest
And
of
you
the
end
need to
world,
shut
this
up.
Denise.
statement with you
Why
have
not,
no stake
Denise?
in
What
you
happens in
have
America
no
affects
stake
the
in
rest
the
of the
game? You're
world.
going to give a
You just
whole
said you don't
perception.
have a stake in it. So
I
why are you
I
personally,
saying
told
I'm
you.
not
something?
I
black
told
and
you
I'm
she
not
Then
doesn't
you
like
American,
people.
then
but
you
I
So
have
shouldn't
an
then
talk
why
about
would
that.
you
opinion.
Then you
open
shouldn't
It
talk
houses
doesn't
about how
around
you
the
impact
treat
country?
fellow
me.
You
black
all
on
sound
water
dumb talking
fountains.
over each other.
That's
Stop.
Guys, everyone's talking over. So let me go to Admiral. Admiral, okay, go for it.
Yeah, like this is where okay, like the political shit's starting to go out the window because y'all do this shit on television and in the real world we just don't give a fuck. Because now where you're pissing me off is where you're pretending to understand the atrocities that apply to our community when you're 4,000 fucking miles away and you wake up every day eating tea and crumpets, not giving a goddamn what the fuck is going on here. I don't give a damn about you jumping on a Twitter space and pretending to understand what the hell's going on in Southeast Alabama where my woods are. I don't see no London ass little blonde haired women running around. Like, what are you talking about? So what the fuck are you addressing about the Supreme Court at all if you're not even over here giving a vote for the Supreme Court? You're focused on emperors and something everywhere else. It's disingenuous for somebody to talk about division to throw their whole narrative. It's like that feminist movement shit where, oh, I can just jump in the conversation and say whatever the fuck I want. Like, and this is where I'll be all inclusive because it's not just one type of woman. So, clearly we don't have this being addressed when it comes to all these other communities. Like women just get to go anywhere they fucking want, say anything they need to, then tell everybody they're being divisive and land a fucking plane with I have no stake in the goddamn game. Please take your no stake having ass to the steakhouse and find one.
Oh, well, when America takes its nose out of everybody else's business, yeah? Because at the end of the day, what happens in America affects the world. So tell your government to stay out of everyone's business,
Okay,
we'll stay out of America's. End of.
global. Then if you're gonna be
Why
global
don't
about
you
it,
model it
talk
first?
about it. Okay. If we're gonna be global, then we can start addressing the shit on the level of the Vatican and everybody fucking us up from the deep side, right? So you gotta address the corruption that's trickling over waters, making our lives even more miserable. That you're not standing. I don't see you raising any
Nigga,
hell
that's Italy,
besides your
not
Twitter
not
space.
not the
Yeah, no.
UK.
I
That's
forgot.
Italy, bro.
I forgot. We don't do lineage though. But Miss Khaleesi's only point is to go with lineage so she can be included in the fucking conversation. So we're gonna make sure she gets her rightful attention emancipation like all feminists want. What do I want? I don't know.
I'm
When do I
actually
want?
not even a feminist, but you go ahead and
No, no,
label me whatever you want to, yeah?
okay, my bad, my bad. We're not gonna call you feminist no more. She's just very attentive. She needs her attention. I clearly see it's the blue eyes that charms all you guys up. And what we call it on our side is pandering. Stop simping for this bullshit. You feel me, fellas? Like, you can be better than this. The world could be fixed already if you stop letting
Oh
women
my
with
God.
foreign
Any more
accents.
labels you
No,
got there, Michael, in that chest of yours? Anything else?
chill. Like I said, I'm gonna land a private jet. I get it. I get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't like all of this attention. Now she don't want the damn attention. So, all right, fellas, you see what I'm saying? We
Hey,
gotta.
Admiral, I have a question for you.
Ad
So,
hominem, ad
Thomas,
hominem, ad hominem.
hey, real quick, because we're just going in circles. It's not a very riveting conversation. So, Thomas Sowell put out a book 2005, Affirmative Action Around the World. It was a study, multiple countries. And his conclusion that was that when racial preferences were banned in the University of California, there was an initial decline in minority enrollment at top-ranked campuses, but it was offset by increases at other campuses. Notably, the ban led to a significant rise in graduation rates amongst Black and Hispanic students, including a 55% increase in four-year graduation rates and a 51% rise in STEM degrees. So the data actually suggests that minority students tend to perform better when they are not mismatched with institutions for which they don't meet the regular admission standards, affirmative action. So I'm curious.
Every
I didn't
time you
finish.
do. Okay, look, you're curious, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut the curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. And
Bro,
you're
what's with your okay, go ahead. Enlighten us.
Oh, let's be serious. Everybody knows we've had this conversation.
Dude, Admiral's entire thing is gaslighting other speakers.
Dude, you don't make a coherent thought. I'm asking you a genuine question. Give me a genuine answer.
I'm giving you a genuine answer. Again,
on topic.
Listen, Cole, stop hanging on to California like it's the only state in America. For some reason, when I left Alabama and came here, everybody here has this little I live in the entire world mentality when California is not the only graphic, which we know the majority population demographic in California is Latin Americans and Asian Americans. So something I got kicked out of school because I kept addressing in the city college
Bro, the
curriculum.
question is, Thomas argued that affirmative action was detrimental to the Black community. Are you aware of that argument? Have you read the book, and what do you think of Thomas Sowell? I don't care about
Thomas Sowell is a coon, bro. Like, that shit ain't gonna have no purchase in this man's head, bro. Thomas Sowell a coon.
Is anybody else gonna actually make a point? Because that guy's just been saying.
I'm waiting for you to make a point. I'm asking you a genuine question. Like, what do you think of what he said in the arguments that he made for the case?
Trying to get the point, then stop being in your emotions and rejecting all the words. Because I hear every word you're saying, but for some reason I'm speaking French back to you, and it's just not making sense. And we talk about
this is why Black kids don't graduate high school, bro. They can't answer questions.
Please remove the troll. It doesn't make any sense. It never has.
I'm not a troll. You're just rambling and not saying anything.
Profession. So call. What I'm trying to get you to understand is, California's statistics, something I addressed in a college curriculum myself, which is, why does it seem like you all have this heavy study analysis on this demographic of Black people in here? And of course, the readings are going to always
We like to be informed before we speak. What's the problem with that?
If artificial intelligence can be biased,
he can't relate, bro. That's why he's getting upset.
Where are the programmers that are making the artificial intelligence bias, right? So we got to understand statistics have been biased in order to create biased artificial intelligence programming, meaning the people.
All right, Denise, do you have an opinion on that? Like, the argument is that affirmative action actually is detrimental to the Black community. And he makes that argument that they're being mismatched to colleges where they're at the lower end, so their graduation rates are lower.
I don't need another man fucking talking for me. You a grown fucking man, and you hear me
do.
talking.
You can't even answer his question, bro. You do need somebody else talking for you.
Yeah, like I said, don't be a fucking wussy and fucking act like I'm not talking to you like a man, dude. I'm talking to you directly, so don't go asking and hiding behind the fucking women. We tell our men that all the time.
Gotta answer his question then, man.
I'm just asking you a question. Just answer the question.
Accept the answer that when
this is why Baltimore doesn't even have like one Black kid that's like literate.
This is what happens when you hang out with just any Black person, right? You get used to that bullshit. Now start actually like listening.
Also, they just make false comments. That's not even true. Like, what are we talking about?
You want me to post it in the Jumbotron?
And this is why.
Right, guys. Too many people are talking now. It's really hard to to follow. Phenom, thanks for joining us. What's your thoughts?
Hey, well, I don't know how long the space has been going, so you might have covered this, but the court precedents for affirmative action, indicated that this was meant to be temporary. So I think it was in 2003 with Sandra Day O'Connor, the court ruled that it was just a temporary measure and that within 25 years it would be obsolete and not necessary. And it's clear that we've long met that standard. So, discrimination based on race is discrimination based on race. So giving anyone preference based on their race is discrimination. So the issue at hand is not emotion. The issue at hand is the Constitution. And that's what the court has found, and they righted a wrong.
What wrong did they write?
So let me go to one second,
all
Admiral. Let me go
people?
to Admiral. I just want to go to Denise on this, if that's all right. So Denise, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. We are about to wrap up as well, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about what Phenom said, and then just generally, your general thoughts would be lovely to hear as well.
Yeah, so affirmative action has not been ended. First of all, people need to check their overstirring of that. In addition to that, there's no legal precedent that said affirmative action had to be ended in 25 years. That was someone saying they would hope that in 25 years somehow affirmative action would be ended. I think that's poor argumentation on the part of the people who were the defendants in all of those cases, because they went for the diversity grift for affirmative action versus the original intent. I personally believe that this decision that limits race-based admissions, it does not say that you cannot consider race. You have to read it what they are saying. I believe that this limit on race-based admissions gets us back to the original intent of affirmative action, which is to repair a particular lineage of people who have been who've had significant economic extractions and exclusions from education. And yes, if you'd like to host another space about Sowell and his theories and applications, I think that's a whole nother thing that we could talk about.
Denise, before we end, I had
Well, he's
one
mentioned in the
quick question
case.
for you.
That's why.
It has been 50 years of affirmative action. That's 2 generations. Is there a point at which you would concede that, okay, this has been enough? We have repaired enough, or is this an eternal battle?
So there were 20 plus generations of deprivations that we are addressing. So when we recover all of what was lost, or a significant portion of what was lost in those 20 plus years, including the 20 billion or 16 billion, I apologize, that has been lost from the last 20 years of racial discrimination, then I would consider that. What I would like to say is liberty over affirmative action was briefly implemented where Negroes were benefiting, but after the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, other immigrants migrated here in mass numbers. They were more favored. Look at Muhammad Ali's talk about that. Look at Malcolm X's talk about that, how they were better treated and had greater access to America, including Indians, including Africans, than did Negroes. So when Negroes are the exclusive or prime beneficiaries of affirmative action, then we'll be doing it right and per original intent and benefiting our nation. The money that we make as Negroes in this nation stays in America. This is our homeland. There are ways people are thinking about this in their own feelings about race and all of that, but they're not thinking about how this was designed to get our nation on the right track and to repair the harms that had happened and were happening, not to people from 1,000 years ago, but to my mama, to my siblings. That's important.
And we want that. We don't disagree. We want the Black community to thrive, to have wealth, to be successful. I think this false correlation that somehow because we don't agree with affirmative action because it's discriminatory means we're against or we want to oppress the Black community. Like, nothing is further from the truth. We just think there's better paths to get there. And there's a lot of evidence that this actually doesn't help, and it makes it worse because it puts people in institutions where they're
Mismatch
no problem.
is a specific element of the issue which needs to be discussed as a particular element, but that doesn't mean that affirmative action as a whole is problematic. So let's not talk about umbrella terms when we're talking about a specific issue.
So actually, I agree with
Well, any cases that come forward will ultimately end up back to the Supreme Court, who just made this ruling. So in effect, it is over.
Okay,
See,
can I finish the point?
there we go.
You
We
need
keep
to read
trying
it
to
because
use
I doubt
this
it.
Supreme Court ruling, and we keep being disingenuous when the same Constitution you all are preaching behind. I mean, if we're wrapping it up here, I'm just going to let it
Yeah,
be known. The
yeah.
point here is we all swear by the Constitution that says we the people. So if you're going to be all inclusive, you can't be selective on who you're being inclusive with. You have to suck it up and accept that this is the Constitution you wrote for everyone to abide by. So that means we should be able to get the accesses and the privileges. And we're not saying that we're excluding anybody. We're just making ourselves known in the inclusive pot and category where everybody
There
else.
says the Constitution says nothing about giving privileges.
The
Can I
Constitution
Affirmative
says
action is
we
is
the people.
definitionally.
interrupt it again? Because that'd be great to make. Thank you. The point I was trying to ask. Well, actually,
Well, I
first,
wasn't gonna go to you, Chief. Like, but anyway, just just wrap up your point within 30 seconds. I was about to end there, bro. But go ahead,
yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah, so actually, I agree. I agree a couple things with Denise. So I agree that this is not going to. Unfortunately, colleges like Harvard will be using the essays to get around affirmative action ban from the Supreme Court. So they're using the affirmative action essays, talking about different things or experiences, and prioritize that to get around the affirmative action one. But I think the issue is we shouldn't be trying to discriminate against any race or give preferential treatment to anybody. And I think that should be condemned by everybody. We shouldn't be giving any sort of treatment to anyone or excluding Asian or white students for this. It shouldn't be allowed, and we should have condemnation of that. And by trying to elevate one group by putting down other groups, that's not a solution. That's just racism. That's all it is. So that's my point.
Right,
All right.
guys.
You really don't stand for it and you really want to make the change, then you'll start taking action, because talking about it is an action. Real action is changed behavior. So when people say these things after 60 years, we're trying to see if people really believe in the things they say. So step to the things you believe, actually show that you want to be behind the people. Like Carl just said, we want to see you thrive. If you really want to see us thrive, then show us that you want to see that thriving
No,
ability.
you show us by thriving. You go
I mean,
out on
we
your own and
have by
thrive.
going
You
through
show us
slavery.
by
We did
thriving.
thrive by going through slavery, allowing civil rights
You did.
movements
You're not a
over,
slave. You're not a
still
You
slave.
didn't go
allowing
through
You
slavery.
show us. You
equality
show us that
and
you can thrive.
supremacy
You can do
before we
it.
did. So we are thriving. I even served the military to give you the ability to say that shit when you don't even know I put my life on the line for you too.
No,
So I
you
am
didn't
You've
thriving.
give
said it
us
a
the
dozen
I'm
ability.
times.
All
We
you
thriving
all
did
know
in
you
was
served,
all you
man.
did was
beautifully.
help
And I just
fight for
want you to know,
the
shout out
Jewish
to all my
globalist
people.
banking
Shout out to
system.
Mari
That's all
for
you
letting
fought
me come
for.
through. Black community is going to
You,
be
you
up
fought
a
for the
million
central
always.
bank
Gotta have that
to be in
conversation.
every single
So
country. That's
shout out
what you
to y'all.
fought for. You didn't fight for our freedom of speech. We can get kicked off of Twitter for
Yeah,
saying
I
nigger.
even fought
We
for
don't
you to
have
do the
freedom of
trolling
speech,
thing
dog.
you're doing right there. You know what I'm saying? So when we talk about sacrifices, let's talk about the sacrifice, because we always go
Yeah,
to
you
Veterans Day.
sacrificed for the Jewish globalist
You're
banking
absolutely
system. That's
right.
all you
As long as the
sacrificed for. It wasn't for our
sacrifice
country,
was made,
bro.
Man, fake, bro.
like I said,
Yeah, you
I
know
let you
what? I am
communities,
so
but it
sick and
won't troll
tired
you.
of the
Right,
the
guys.
bad.
Forget. That's the Denise. I'm gonna give you 15 seconds just to wrap up, so we can wrap up on a good note, and then we can end the space. Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, thank you for the space. Affirmative action was not banned. This decision basically clarifies that there needs to be specificity in why race is used. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, Harvard had a poor legal strategy. This is not the end of it. The use of essays would be an implementation of this decision, not a way to get around it. The justices mentioned the use of essays as a way to understand a student's experience and to decide on their admissions criteria. Thanks again for having me up. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, Denise. Nick, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a debate that is going to go on for a very long time. I think there's more to it. There's more. There were some things, as we learned tonight, that were not covered in Justice Roberts' opinion. You know, his majority opinion that was put out. Clarence Thomas seemed to be a lot more strict on this and totally abolishing any sort of affirmative action in college admission processes. But you know, this is their affirmative action goes further than just college admissions. We're talking about hiring practices. We're talking about you know, DEI is a huge thing right now. You know, especially with firms like BlackRock, for example, that are pushing this. That's one of their narratives when it comes to rating whether or not they are going to invest their clients' funds in companies. And you know, that's something that needs to be addressed as well. So this is only step one. We could be seeing a lot more abolitionment of different affirmative action programs that don't just apply to colleges. So that's what I've got to say.
You don't fix racism with racism, guys. Please reflect on that.
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you coming on the space, and we'll see you same time tomorrow, 6 p.m.